Hey, team players, welcome back. This is going to be a great week. Love that we're already started out with some questions here. My partner in crime, Bob, here will be jumping in here very shortly with us. And like I said, we're so excited for this week 4. Not a whole lot of good streamers to look at as we're looking at defenses, but I want to dive right into your questions, get right into it. That's what this is all about. Let's get into it. All right, Z, what's going on? Oh, all right. We look at Baker. So that's a tough list there. For this week and moving forward, let's start with the bigger picture of moving forward. In the long run, there are some of these that are very easy to remove. Caleb Williams shouldn't be even really mentioned in this list. Neither should Justin Fields. The reason for that being is that Fields is going to be removed from the starter in Pittsburgh as soon as Russell Wilson is healthy. Caleb Williams had one good game against immense garbage time, and that good game also included 3 turnovers against one of the worst defenses and or softest defenses that the league has in the Indianapolis Colts. So those 2 are the immediate bottom of the list. We don't want to look at them. Looking at Darnold, Baker, Carr, and Goff now. Goff is going to be the cream that rises to the crop because he has the best weapons and he has the best environment, given that there is no outside pressure. I mean, really, he's playing outside games twice this year. The at Green Bay, the at Chicago. The Detroit offense is still rated to be one of the absolute top scoring offenses in the league, without a doubt. So Goff, for the long term moving forward, is going to be the king of the group. The next one on the list is going to be Baker and then Darnold. So that's going to be your answer, both for this week and the long term. Okay. Just traded away Aaron Jones, Jalen Reed, and Brooks for Harrison Jr., Love, and Hunt. And then here's the roster below for Z Money. So when we look at this overall, with Hunt, I don't really know if that's necessarily any value to your team. You might never actually use them. But when you're giving me a lineup that has Amal, Rice, and Marvin in it, this is a championship-worthy lineup here. Even if Dobbins trails off a little bit, you have Brian Thomas there as your second flex. I really love where your team is at here, Smitty. It's at a great spot. Your running backs are just dynamite. There's not really too much you need to change with here because you're going to be able to play matchups every single week between Love and Baker and really be able to get some good things here. So you have a guy who dropped Keenan Allen. Do you want to pick him up with any fab? Not really. We've been saying here for a couple of weeks that Chicago is one of these teams, as well as with the Jaguars. You'll be able to take these comments with the Jaguars as well, that preseason money from the markets was very heavy on both Chicago's and the Jaguars' offenses. Miami's too, but Miami was an injury reason why. But now we see week 4 in the season on the betting lines, as well as we saw the evidence before, the money's coming off those offenses. Those offenses are projected to do less and less and much closer to the league average. In Miami's case, below league average moving forward. So those are offenses you don't want to be tied to. And then we look deeper into Keenan Allen's situation. Yes, he's on paper the number 2 receiver right now, but he's also the volume guy who doesn't get a lot of touchdowns, and he has a young up-and-coming rookie taking over. It's a very similar situation what Tyler Lockett found himself in last year. The key difference between Lockett last year in Seattle and Keenan Allen this year is twofold. First, Lockett never got hurt, and Lockett has been with that team for a very long time. And the second one is that longevity. So the Bears are not invested in Keenan Allen and keeping him happy. They are invested in Odunze. So when you look at this moving forward, Allen is a guy that I don't want to pick up at all, even for free, because I don't think he's really going to give you any tangible benefits. If you're looking to pick someone up here on the very cheap, Michael Wilson in Arizona is a guy that we keep talking about a lot. He is a guy who one injury away from being the absolute next man up. And it looks like McBride might be dinged a little bit. So we think that Michael Wilson would be a much better candidate than Keenan Allen, not to mention he's getting a hat this week. 12-team PPR trade advice. Love doing trades. 1 and 2, not the end of the world. We got Connor and Muth for McBride. Your other running backs are set. So I do like getting the stack there with McBride. That being said, this whole tight end Russian roulette, I don't think is worth getting rid of James Conner for. We don't see that much tangible gap above McBride, giving I'm talking this week, present injury situation compared to Freiermuth. We also do have Muth as a guy who's going to project to put up more points in the second half of the year than the first half of the year for two main reasons. First is that you're about to see a much more accurate quarterback during the second half of the year when Fields gets benched. It's a fact of life. That will help Freiermuth. And also, the tight end defenses the Steelers play in the second half of the year, the playoff push for fantasy football, is much more conducive for Muth. So at this point in time, I wouldn't be looking to move him for McBride. I don't think it's a big enough upgrade. I would actually kind of stay sitting where you're at here. I get what you're saying about I have Connor. Why don't I use him as a piece to upgrade? And I'm fine with that as your strategy. What I would want to know, Joseph, is who are your flex candidates? Maybe we're able to upgrade a receiver using Connor as a very good tool there. Maybe we can upgrade into really one of the elite receivers. Because if you do a similar trade with a flex receiver or even your number 2 receiver and turn that into Harrison, we believe you'll be in a much better situation than if you do Connor and Muth for McBride. Because quite frankly, you're giving up too much in that trade as it is. So again, those questions from Smitty and Joseph came before we even launched today. So if you've already subscribed to us, you have that benefit of getting your answers up front before the show even begins to lead us off. Jonathan, welcome back, my man. So you got some big decisions. Obviously, you're 0-3. Dobbins, Ayuk, GSN, 1 point for the first downs. Love that little twist in there. JSN is a first down machine. When we look at the rest of those options, though, however, we do get ourselves in a question of, I don't know, like do we want to go running back? Ayuk didn't really do anything last week. How is that going to play out? Is that the Rams basically just showed that unless Kittle's playing, you can delete Ayuk and still win the game, even if the rest of their team goes off, which is exactly what happened with Jennings. So I look at this and say, do I want to invest in Ayuk? Do I want to go there? He's by far the highest rated player entering into it in terms of entering into the season. But if Debo's not playing, JSN's going to get you more first downs. And it's the extra point for the first downs is what's making this difficult. If you were a normal PPR, it's Ayuk, no questions asked. It's just what it is. But given the fact that you have the extra point for the first downs, I'm leaning towards JSN. Now, we don't have an actual model that includes the extra point for the first downs. This is me just going off of knowing how many that JSN brings to the table, being much more of a volume guy than Ayuk, that I would lean that direction. That's how I would go up front here. Just to let you guys know that all up front. Different league, sit one between these three. All right, so we're looking at A-Chain, Ayuk, and Moss. We're big on Zach Moss. Just to start that up front, and the simple fact is Carolina or Cincinnati's defense cannot stop people. Sure, Rookey was the best one in the class. You can go back to our history. I was much bigger on him. than on Williams. But it's still Washington, guys. Like, that defense has to be able to stop people better than that. And flat out, they just weren't able to. So I do like getting into the offense of the Bengals because the Bengals have to score to save their lives. Not to mention they're 0-3. So when you look at this in totality, offense has to produce. They need to win. There's no other pathway there. And, oh, by the way, they're playing Carolina. So Zach Moss, to me, is going to be one of the starters of those two. Now it comes down to Ayuk and A-Chain. Ayuk's playing the Patriots. That's kind of a doable one. And Miami here is playing Tennessee. That's also a very doable defense as well. Given the fact that Miami is all over the place with where they're saying their quarterback is going to be, if it's Huntley, I want to play A-Chain a little bit more, but not more than Moss. And there's no way I can't play Ayuk. So that would be my answers. We're going to sit A-Chain this week because, again, Miami's not projected to put up a whole ton, a lot of points. And as good as A-Chain is and as limited as there as the quarterback, he's still their third best option. So I'm going with Ayuk and Moss as far as your two to play this week, Jonathan. Could I trade Rachaad White and Shaheed together, and should I keep A-Chain? So this is one of these players that Bob and I are in a little bit of disagreement about. Is he's much higher on Shaheed than I am. I am under the belief that you have seen probably two, if not two, of the three best weeks of the Shaheed season. He is so touchdown dependent. He is so big play dependent. And yes, Carr was able to cut the gap in a couple of cover twos, which is how he got his touchdowns. That's out. And at the end of the day, I think that Shaheed is a much easier player to bottle up and hide than A-Chain. That being said, you have to move Rashid Weiss. That's not a debate. Doing trade dynamics correctly, it's better to do two of a different position than two of the same position. So add that all together. The running back and receiver would be the two you'd want to pair together. In terms of what I think realistically you should be targeting there, it's all going to be based upon how much your league mates are invested in the name brands. If you have people that are, you're going to get more value for White. If you have people that, just go, hey, he's not doing anything or he's going to get benched, which he's going to get benched. You need to move White now. I kind of look at this as the best you can get type situation. Don't expect to get any top end flights. Looking at someone who could give you potential upside and hasn't done it yet is probably your best bet to look at. So up there, we're looking at any of the injured receivers. If someone is in a must-win situation now, we're talking of the one. Debo's a great candidate. Again, they have to be in a must-win situation to even consider this. Debo would have been a candidate. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at either like the Colemans or Ladd McConkeys of the world, because you get someone who has the potential to be the guy with volume is always going to be better than what Shaheed's giving you. So that would be kind of the two directions I would look there, Adam. Yeah, dude, the bottom line here, Machine, is, get Javonte Williams off your roster as well. If you can do a slight add-on to get a lateral move type trade, I would look that. By lateral move, I mean like moving Olave and getting in Devontae Smith. And yes, I know that Smith is coming off the concussion. He is still an upgrade over Olave. If you can do that with the Javonte thrown into it, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Just switching within the same tier of player and moving across. You might get a little bit more luck in the tight end space than you would in the receiver, but that would be the direction that I would look in is, get him off your roster now. It's just the way it needs to be. Ooh. Next one up here. Nino, welcome back, my man. With what's going down in Miami, he wants Godwin for Tyreek. I mean, infinitely speaking, Tyreek's a vastly better player. And Tyreek has the possibility, if they get halfway of a decent quarterback who's just willing to chuck the ball, that he's going to give you better long-term results for the rest of the year. So, yes, if you have a guy who is willing to do this trade, take Tyreek Hill. That one's kind of the easier one of the questions today. So, yeah, I would absolutely recommend to do that one there, Nino. Carlos, all right, first off, I love when you guys tell me your type of leagues and your records because it does make a deal here. So dynasty leagues are obviously one of our favorites here. Got a couple of offers for Kyring. One is Josh Jacobs, and your second, and a second. The other one is Bucky, first and a second. Can I then flip the first for Kenneth and get another guy? Okay. I really like where your head's at. First off, we're talking dynasty leagues, so we are definitely zooming in to offer number 2. I firmly believe that within the next 3 weeks, Bucky Irvin is going to be the substantial ball carrier in Tampa Bay. So that's a guy I want to invest into. You might have gotten the absolute best luck in the world by Kareem putting up those 3 touchdowns last week. The Rams offense has a great mastermind in front of it, but they still have a broken offensive line and no real pass protection. So I'm all for trading Kareem right now. Having Bucky on your roster for the rest of the year is not the end of the world. And I wouldn't even worry about sitting on him for the number 1 as your number 2 starter here. When I look at then what to do with the additional first and second pick, rather than turning your first into Kenneth Walker, I would look into packaging both of your seconds. And here's my primary reason for this. When you look at the upcoming draft for the NFL, it is loaded with running backs. So I would rather like to have 2 swings in the first round of the running backs. And I do believe that anytime you do a trade that's pairing up 2 second rounders in a dynasty league, that you should be able to get Kenneth Walker. Although that being said, based upon all the information I just gave you, I'd rather look at a receiver. Again, maybe not necessarily the youngest. Like, you're not going to get Harrison in a dynasty league. But I'd potentially look at using one of those seconds to try to pry away at George Pickens. He's a great lottery pick moving forward. That would be the direction I would go. And just ride Bucky for the rest of this season, knowing that you're going to use your 2 first-round picks next year to snag up 2 great running backs. That's how I would do that play in a dynasty league there, Carlos. Guys, I love that you keep sending questions. I will be getting them all. Again, big props to the guys who send it before the show starts. You get a little extra time and a little extra love on them. I've been trying to trade White, haven't had any luck. What kind of receiver or running back do you think I can get for him if I add him with Christian Kirk? So the thing with Kirk is that, again, Jacksonville's a team worth looking out of, but it kind of has gotten a lot of publicity above it about why can't Lawrence win a game. So if you're looking at moving Kirk and pairing him up with White, I love Ladd McConkey still. I think that when we look at that offense, he is growing into taking over that role of being the down mover as Palmer is getting flushed out. It's a very good thing to see here in September. One thing with the way that the Chargers are built is that they are one Dobbins injury away from becoming a pure passing team, even though they don't want to, because Gus Edwards only averages 2.5 yards a carry. So Ladd McConkey is someone I'm really big on having a bigger second half of the year as Dobbins, wears out essentially. I still am big on Coleman, but I think that's probably the neck of the woods you're looking at. You're not going to be getting into a Metcalf. You probably can't even get into a JSN with Kirk and White. But Ladd and Coleman, I think, would be 2 good directions to look at there, Miggy. Because, again, I do think that Coleman's just going to keep getting a bigger role as time goes on, because eventually he's just going to separate himself from the other receivers. But I do like what Buffalo's doing and making him earn it rather than just getting anointing it, as that's one of the things that really upset Josh Allen with how Diggs flat out was anointed. Welcome, Bob.
Yeah, and everybody in the chat, we'll get to all your questions. I see Carlos. We appreciate you, Carlos, as well, for coming to us to get some advice. So thank you very much.
All right.
A little late.
It's all good. Fergie or Kelsey this week, and is Garrett Wilson worth mentioning? First of all, I love that question, Andre. This is why you're one of my people, man. So glad you're a team player. So we talked about, I was going to start with Wilson first. We talked about how Surtain basically has been blanking everyone out. That's going to keep happening. When you look at Denver's defense, they basically have one player. So Rodgers already hates throwing interceptions. Mm-hmm. He's not going to force it to him because Lazard is always. So I look at this overall and basically say, hey, and I need to know what the rest of your team is, Andre, because I apologize, I don't remember from yesterday. But on the surface, if you have enough enough dudes, it's not the craziest idea in the world. And then when we're talking about either Fergie or Kelsey, I mean, Dallas needs to show up in a big, big way, and they are going to their number one rival. So when we look at this here, I'm leaning Ferguson over Kelsey. Now, granted, Kelsey's playing his biggest rival too in the Chargers. But the thing is Dallas needs a number two. Kansas City has weapons without Kelsey. And I think Ferguson is just in a better situation. Coming back after injury and putting those kind of results up immediately, which were better than Kelsey last week, lead me to lean in that Ferguson camp. Where are you at, Bob?
Yeah, so I think that for that first question, Andre, I would definitely start Ferguson. I think that right now, and I was viewing some content by some different creators as well over the last couple of days as well. And, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that until we see something out of Kelsey, that it's really not worth starting him unless it's like an absolutely incredible matchup. What we have seen, I think right now, is that looking at Kelsey from a fantasy perspective is he was drafted practically as the number one tight end. But when we look at his year so far, especially in terms of yards, he's the 21st tight end in terms of yards. He's also, when we look at just receptions, because you're like, oh, well, maybe that's coming from, a lot of receptions. 14th, tied with Colby Parkinson, Sam Laporta, Kincaid Pitts, Jordan Akins, and Eric All Jr. and Cade Otton. So you're not getting a lot of action there with Travis Kelsey. Then you look at the fact that, okay, percentage of team targets, he's getting 14% of the team's targets. So you come and you say, okay, well, if I'm Kansas City, is it worth passing him the ball? I mean, the guy is able to catch, and he looks kind of cooked. We're looking at 69 yards, 73 of those were air yards. So he has 21 yards after the catch. We look at the wide receivers now, and it seems to me, at least right now, that Rashee Rice, like I've been saying over the last several weeks, is the guy to own. I'm really upset we didn't get a bunch of pieces of him in best ball formats. But he has 33.7% of the team's target share. I look at it and I say, when push comes to shove right now, Mahomes isn't looking Kelsey's way. He's looking Rashee Rice's way. He's going to start to look at Worthy's way. He might get those running backs involved a little bit. Last week I said, well, maybe, this is the time for Kelsey to shine. Worthy might be opening up those underneath routes so Kelsey could elevate himself to the next level. But I think right now, we can't trust Kelsey right now. It's possible that he throws up a big enough game that, you come back and you say, okay, that's what I want. That's what I was expecting. That's what I want to see. But I think right now, Ferguson puts you in a more comfortable situation on a team that needs to win, quite honestly.
That's right? Bigger part.
They need to win. They need to get these players involved. And you look at Ferguson, even with that game missed, he has more yards and more receptions, more air yards, around 13% of the team's target share as well. But again, there's that hope with Ferguson. There doesn't seem to be a lot of hope with Travis Kelce.
And to take this a further point off of what Bob's getting at there is,
hey 305, hey Steve, hey Rams, we see you. Carlos Juggo, we see you as well.
You don't need to read every time, Bob.
Go ahead.
We know we're there. We know they love them. Team players, click subscribe. We got them. We'll get to all your questions, guys. But the further point, and this is big for all Dallas players this week, is that Dallas is obsessed with their PR possibly more than any other team. They're in a national showcase in their national game. Their offense is going to go off. This could be the best squeeze of the juice of Dallas earlier in the year. And there's not too many teams that you're going to get a tiebreaker that Dallas is going to lose to in terms of who you should start, knowing that they need to drop a lot because that's how the heat inside that building is when you have Jerry Jones in charge of it. It's just the way that it is. Love you, man.
Yeah, and in terms of your other question, Andre, you had a second question up here before we get to Aman. Is Garrett Wilson worth benching this week? Yes, absolutely, 1,000% yes. And this kind of goes and builds into a question before we get to Aman here that Nino asked: Is it with him being guarded by Surtain? We'll talk a little bit about Lazard in a little bit, Nino. But yes, I think Garrett Wilson right now, with the way Patrick Surtain is playing, is a benchable candidate. You probably won't feel burned because Garrett Wilson, honestly, wasn't putting up extreme stats against not as good corners. This corner is an elite corner, and he's probably going to be eliminated from the game, maybe get 30 yards, maybe get 4 receptions or so, maybe even less than that. I mean, to be honest, he stopped DK Metcalf, stopped Mike Evans, and stopped George Pickens. All 3 of those guys, super talented wide receivers, age, older and younger, fast and slow, all this business. I think he's worth a definite sit this week.
Hard to fight that.
So was thinking of offering Rachaad White for Najee, but saw he's dealing with a shoulder injury. Should I still send the offer? Joe, I think I'd like to start this one. I think I would. I would definitely still send that offer. Najee being banged up, we're going to know a little bit more today. We're going to know a little bit more tomorrow. We'll know more by Friday. But what we already do know about Rachaad White is that Rachaad White isn't getting the volume that he's getting, and what he's doing with that volume is nothing really worth starting. And if I'm being honest, when it comes to these two players, they have basically the same kind of floor, which is around 7 points. Najee could get about 60 yards. Listen, Najee could get about 60 yards on the ground, maybe a catch. Rachaad White could get 4 or 5 catches, about 20 yards, 30 yards, and then get like 20 yards on the ground. And that pretty much crosses the board. So Najee does it differently than Rachaad White.
Well, that's true.
What I want to say is that Rachaad White's volume is eventually most likely going to go down because you're seeing that Bucky Irving is the better running back. You're seeing that Bucky Irving can also catch passes. You're seeing that Rachaad White is a depreciating asset right now. And even with a Najee injury to an arm, right? Even with that injury, which could be a concern this week or next week or the week after, Rachaad White is also a liability and a concern in your lineup because he's not getting the volume and being efficient enough with the volume he's being given to make it worth starting him. So you need to pass that to somebody else. And say he goes off and say he kicks butt over 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. You still got him off your roster and you're picking up a piece that is a valuable piece of an offense that is trying to move the ball, is dedicated to running the ball, and is not giving up on a guy like Najee, who, has had some efficiency problems himself, but looks much better this year.
So Bob's 100% right in that you look at where White's at. He's declining. He's not going to have the same floor 3 weeks from now because he's not going to be on the field. But when you look at the answer is that you should offer it, but the guy should not accept it. I mean, that's the bottom line answer with this here. So before we get, let's get this going here, Amon. Let's jump into your next one here. Just picked up Williams in case Kamara misses any time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a decent insurance policy, but you're basically backing up a 90-year-old with a 90-year-old in terms of football years.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it has.
Andre Miller, all the reports where he's in a doghouse during camp all young. I'd still personally lean him. All my best ball lineups reflect that. That being said, we do project that New Orleans offense is going to cool down. I mean, how couldn't it? But there's nothing wrong with having a true insurance policy on your team. Just to put that out there outright.
In the current day and age, with the way that with this being basically the most injured a season we have had to start the year, with offensive linemen now getting injured this week, basically, with two offensive, basically the tackles for the Chargers, both are injured, could miss a couple of weeks, which could damage the prospects for J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and the whole offense in general. But I think it's always advisable to go and pick up a running back handcuff, as long as it makes sense for your team. You're probably not going to play Williams. And the question I would ask you, Amon, is it eating up a roster space, right? So if Jamal Williams isn't eating up a roster space, and he can be dropped a little bit later, but will be used if Kamara misses time, I think it's a fair thing to say that, that's not a bad move to make. Nino, when it comes to Garrett Wilson here, with Surtain, Garrett Wilson is a non-start. When I look at these two other players, I favor Lazard. And for this, basically this one caveat is that usually I would, if this were any other kind of late kind of flex matchup, I'd probably go with Mooney. However, Aaron Rodgers loves Allen Lazard. This is a fact. This is one of the facts that I brought up. And for no other you can look at the history of Allen Lazard. And whenever
he gets touchdowns,
whenever Aaron Rodgers is with Allen Lazard is relatively successful. There is no reason that Allen Lazard should have the same amount of yards as Garrett Wilson to this point in the season. That does not make sense. Just from a psychological standpoint, and just from Garrett Wilson is a much better player. He hasn't.
It's like close, yeah.
Super crazy competition. Allen Lazard has 11 receptions for 148 yards. He has one drop to Garrett Wilson's 3, but he's had 17% of the Jets' targets, 17% to Garrett Wilson's 28, and yet Allen Lazard has basically the same amount of yards. So there's a lot to say about this, right? But when we look at it and we think about, okay, what does the red zone look like? And the red zone is an important place for the Jets because they've been there a little bit more recently, right? So we look at this red zone stats for these wide receivers, and I'm just going to pull up the Jets real quick here, is that Allen Lazard is heavily involved. And, you see it in the box scores a lot. You're like, oh, well, that's kind of strange. Allen Lazard has been targeted 5 times in the red zone. Garrett Wilson, 5 times in the red zone.
And remember, they basically didn't get in the red zone against the Niners in week 1.
And that's a lot. They share the same amount of targets with inside the 5, and they share inside the 10, same amount of targets.
Yeah. So the long story short is,
for me, if Garrett Wilson's going to be a non-start because of Patrick Surtain, well, then what is Aaron Rodgers going to do to win this game? Well, he's going to give the ball to Braylon Allen, Breece Hall, and Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard, I think, is one of the biggest smashes this week. I logistically think that he could put up between 15 to 20 points, maybe even more, just based upon the usage that he gets from Aaron Rodgers. It's stupid.
He is. He's definitely a good DFS pick. And guys, we love that you guys keep sending questions. We see you down there, Blinks, Rams, Steve, welcome back. Oh, we got some Raiders boys in the house, but we'll get to your questions here as we're coming down them in order.
So, Joseph, my wide receivers are A.J. Brown, Debo, Higgins, Waddle, and
so to go back to your question before, he was asking what do I do to upgrade my team? Bob, you can find it in the question higher. I believe he was looking to move one of the running backs that are falling out, either the one in Tampa or the one in Denver. But what I would do looking at here is I would pair him with Higgins.
Okay.
Either Higgins or Waddle. Upgrade your receiver there. Because when you come back, Metcalf, or if you can turn it into Metcalf, and you would have Brown, Debo, Metcalf, and Worthy as your flex. I mean, that's championship level. Higgins is the one that gives me the biggest question mark moving forward for two reasons. First, it's a leg injury. Those hammies do linger. The second is Cincinnati's season could already be shot. And the third is he's going to hold out for a contract indirectly. So Higgins, to me, is the guy of that whole group I would want to get rid of. He still has the name cachet to get you some love. Joseph, that would be the one I would want to upgrade. Again, I don't think you're going to be able to get into the super stratosphere, but if you can get me a Metcalf, I really love the way that roster looks.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that out of those 5 guys who I would want to move on from would be Higgins and Waddle, and they all have very real name recognition. And I think you could actually put together a nice premium package to get something who's actually performing right now. And, like Joe said, Higgins, definitely there's the getting the contract, injury concern, all those things to think about with T. Higgins. And anybody who has T. Higgins right now, you've waited a couple of weeks to start T. Higgins. So, week 1, coming out the gate, not really great. So you might be wanting to wait a couple more weeks, but in a couple more weeks, we could see him go down again. We could see something happen. And so for me, I think if I'm moving any of those guys, I'm moving Higgins and Waddle, and I'm trying to upgrade into something different, like Joe said, with a DK Metcalf. I think that's a really smart decision. DK's really rolling right now, and I think that he, as a player, he's one of those guys that I really want on my team. But also, if I'm willing to trade him to upgrade to something else, like if I have him and I can make a major upgrade to a CeeDee Lamb, that's kind of what I'm going to do. So this week, start Dak or Baker Mayfield. All right. So this is again,
Dak's at the Giants. Baker is home against Philly.
So 2 viewpoints on this FBU. 2 viewpoints. Number 1, usually I like to stay away from quarterbacks Thursday night, no matter who it is. Usually that's my MO. This game looks like it's going to be kind of one of those weird, dirty games. Dallas is -6, even though they've been playing like garbage. So that that doesn't track with me.
No, it doesn't. That's a very good point.
Being at home, the Giants are at home underdogs by 6 to a team that has lost more games recently. So I look at this and I say, well, while this could be a nice game for Dak to really excel, I'm nervous about Thursday. That's kind of my MO.
That's fair.
He put up a lot of garbage time stats this past week. While with Baker, that makes me there's a little bit different viewpoint that I have here. You come out, you kind of lay a goose egg last week after being so hot, but Philadelphia is banged up in their wide receiving core. They do still have Saquon Barkley, but they just lost another wide receiver to the IR, the Britton Covey guy. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith probably won't play. So this is probably going to be running through Saquon, Jahan Dotson, and Jalen Hurts. So I foresee a lot of the way that this MO could be for Philadelphia would be a lot of keep it on the ground with Hurts and Barkley, end the game as fast as I can, get to the next.
Yeah. And if you also look at it, last week, Philadelphia played the hottest passing attack in the league. New Orleans is the only team that was ripping it over the top. They basically blanked them. I mean, they completely shut down New Orleans. I understand the Thursday concern.
So I go with Dak.
I'm going Dak all day. I mean, this isn't even close for me. I think this is going to be your best Thursday night performance of the year. This is going to surpass Fields' 4 touchdowns to DJ Moore last year. This is going to be stupid, embarrassing the rivals, or else half of Dallas getting fired.
I mean, this could very well be a game where Dak throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and this is like the coming back out of Dak. But Thursday games scare me because it could be very easily 1 touchdown, 2 picks. 147 yards, something stupid like that. But I still go with Dak, even knowing that, because this Philadelphia game, I feel like Philadelphia is -2. With all those injuries, they're still -2. I would have thought that Tampa would be the favorite in this game with the way that Tampa looked outside of last week, with all those injuries.
Tampa has 2 defensive linemen that are out right now, and the fear is Philly's going to run right through.
I think
valid.
Hurts and Barkley will run this game out. I'm not worried about that. I think Dak could have a great performance, better than Baker, so I go Dak. Mossy here. What do I do with Dobbins? And also, who do I start? Ridley, Worthy, Christian Kirk, and Dowdle. I think there's 2 pathways for Dobbins. Number 1, you can sell him.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say sell him is I think there's a good long-term potential hold for Dobbins. However, the 2 offensive line injuries are problematic because, both the tackles, they looked really good and they really helped him get some holes, right? Number 2, the injury to Justin Herbert. Again, we don't know what's going to happen there. We also saw that against a very, very good run defense in Pittsburgh, he was basically kind of just like any normal running back, like we thought, he could be on a week-to-week basis. Now, what are the games that he can look better in? So let's take a look at the schedule, Joe.
So you look at the Chargers here moving forward. They got Kansas City this week, then a bye. Then you got Denver, Zona, New Orleans. None of which are really stopping the run here. So here's kind of the conundrum you're looking at with Dobbins. You're not going to get as much for moving him right now because his bye week is next week. So you're going to have to either play him or sit him this week and then just eat him next week during his bye and then move him. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just because that's going to be his peak of his return. You also then have 2 more weeks of potential, running backs getting hurt. I don't have a problem moving Dobbins at all.
Yeah, and I love the matchup coming up. I love them against the Broncos. I love it against the Cardinals, and I love it against the Titans. My problem is that without, and this was the thing that I think we saw a little bit of last week with the Titans too. Now, I'm not making any comparison between any of those players specifically, but when a team is not scared of a quarterback, they're going to probably play the run a little bit more and then just allow whatever they allow through the air. And I think that if teams are not afraid of whatever quarterback they decide to trot out there, you're either an injured Justin Herbert, Easton Stick, or whoever else they have right now, I don't think that teams like the Cardinals are going to be frightened. I don't think teams like the Broncos are going to be frightened. I don't think that Saints are going to – the Saints, all 3 of those teams, even though the Broncos and the Cardinals are good enough matchups, I think they're going to probably play more down to prevent J.K. Dobbins from having big plays. I'm not worried about Dobbins in volume long term, but I do think that if you would ask me this question last week, I would have said keep Dobbins, definitely play him in the matchups that look good. But with the 2 injuries plus the Herbert injury coming back, resurfacing, I'm just not comfortable with the Chargers in totality. And for that same reason, I'm not fully comfortable with a guy like Ladd right now either in my starting lineup. I would want to hold on. I would want to hold those guys. But if I am trading him, I would trade him probably. I mean, right now would probably be a good time to trade him because, you'd have somebody else eat that bye week. But honestly, you're probably the type of return you're going to get, you would probably have to pair Dobbins up with probably a Ridley type or a Christian Kirk, and you'd probably only be able to move up just a little bit in terms of value on your roster. So I think it doesn't make sense right now to trade him. Somebody offered me in my home league Dobbins or Brian Robinson plus Laporta for AJ Brown, and I was like, no, I'm not. I don't want that piece of the action. And I do need a tight end. I had Goddard. Goddard went off again. These are the types of things. It's like getting the trade out there, getting it on the table. But I don't think we should trade Dobbins right now. He's a hold for me right now.
And Macy, to go off of this a little bit deeper, we are beyond the point where we're not thinking Dobbins is going to be a superstar top 5 in the league anymore. But what Dobbins has clearly done, which was his offseason risk, he has clearly cemented him as the best runner, no doubt, in a run-heavy offense. Mm-hmm. That fact doesn't change. So
I still think
he's RB2 material the rest of the year. I'm still playing him every week just because I know the volume he's going to get. Sure, is Jones going to shoot him down a little bit? Yeah, so the Steelers defense. He's not playing those two defenses again.
Yeah, I still think J.K. Dobbins is going to end up top 8 in yardage across the running, like just rushing yards by the end of the season. And I do think that he could potentially end up top 12, but now I'm a bit more hesitant to say those two
So
things.
The answer you should make is absolutely. I am playing Dobbins.
Yeah.
I'm playing Dobbins every week for the rest of the year. I think you're going to be set on him. And then the answer to the second half of your question of who do I start on that second group, to me, even though he's a rookie, Worthy is in a category by himself of that group.
Worthy is definitely. We were talking a couple episodes ago that he is one of those players that over the course of the year, because you saw this development from Rashee Rice as well, where you had some down games to start the year. And I think that the long-term value, especially towards the back end of this season when they faced in the fantasy playoffs against Cleveland, Houston, and the Steelers, that Worthy's probably going to come around and be a very valuable asset. However, I don't necessarily think that he is totally worth starting this week. The Chargers, like we just said, it is going to be problematic. They're going to be on the field a lot. Kansas City Chiefs are. But I'm not 1,000% sold on Worthy as a back-end flex option right now because he's just not getting enough. You know what I'm saying? This is the same.
Well, you got the problem this week.
This is the same reason with a guy like Rashid Shaheed, right? When he gets the volume, when he gets those 3, 4, 5 targets and he catches 2 or 3 of them, he can do
this is Kansas City Chargers. They blow it up on them.
He can do amazing things with it. But like what I said right now, 4 targets, 3 rushing attempts. Love that for him. The rushing attempts have gone up. They're using him with Pacheco going down the way that we thought that they would use him. I would also, right now, as I sit here on Wednesday, I think that I'm really thoughtful about this and thinking about Ridley as well. Ridley had a terrible game. The whole Titans offense had a terrible game.
Yeah.
They are playing Miami this week. Green Bay's defense, I believe, is a smidge better than Miami's defense this year.
Yeah.
This game could be really gross. I mean, Huntley, Scoop is coming into this game, probably going to start. There's probably going to be a decent amount of running from Miami. Ridley might get a couple good looks if he can turn around and do something really good with them.
Dude, Levis, now that Bryce Young is benched, Levis is by far the worst. Not that guy's still in Chicago. He's the second worst quarterback in the league right now in terms of putting the ball where it needs to be. I'm not trusting any of that passing game.
I'm there with you. But when I look at all 4 of these players, the biggest concern I have for all 4 is volume. That's the biggest concern that I have.
Worthy's going to do by far the most with it.
Worthy has potential to do the most. I think that if Worthy does the most, right? If Worthy gets, say, 7 touches in this game, 8 touches in this game, there's a good chance that he could get 50 total yards and potentially, if given the right situation, a touchdown. I think Ridley, for all of the things that we say negatively about Ridley, I think that Ridley's most likely guaranteed at least 3 catches in this game. Okay. What he does with those 3 catches, I'm not 1,000% sure. Same with a guy like Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, if he gets the ball thrown his way, he's probably going to have a decent enough stat line, especially in PPR. Dowdle's not even on my radar. So I agree with you in saying that I think right now, as we sit today, that Worthy would be the play that I play because there's more upwards potential. But if you do like the matchup against Miami better, I think that Ridley would be the second guy I would consider out of these two plays. So for us, it is worthy, but there is a reason to say that Ridley might also have a good enough game. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything more about Tennessee unless we get a Tennessee.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
So FBU, trade Mixon and Braylon Allen for Bijan Robinson. If you
and Gaming City and George, we love that you're throwing the comments. We will be getting to you guys. Yeah, Gaming City and George, we will get to your questions here. We're going down the list in the order we received them. Again, major props to the people who sent us questions before the show began. That's a perk of being a team player and getting your questions in early. They'll be the first ones you see on the replay.
Back to this FBU. Trading Mixon and Braylon Allen, I think that's easy for me. If you can make that happen, getting Bijan Robinson, I think, is really smart.
Yeah.
Mixon can be a valuable piece of the offense, but he has to stay healthy. Right now, he's not currently healthy. Braylon Allen looks nice, looks real nice, but also is just still kind of that piece. If Breece Hall were to go down, Braylon Allen could be a definite smash play. But right now, you're getting the best player. You're getting the best player in the deal. You're trimming the fat off the backside of your roster. You're going after making your best lineup possible. And I think that Bijan, right now he's kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of, what he's been doing.
I still don't think you're getting this one accepted, though, man.
But if you can manage to do that, if you can get it, people are high on Braylon Allen right now, and people are equally as high on, Joe Mixon after that week 1 performance. But I think that, I would rather have Bijan Robinson here. Like I said, I think he's in the middle of the pack, right, in terms of
yardage wise. No, I understand all that, but it's going to be hard to get that one through as presently constructed. If you want to get Bijan, we can make something for it. Revin, I love it. Do I trade Shakir for Pollard? Do you have the depth to move him? I think you can do better in Pollard. Just long story short. I don't know how much more better, but I think you can do better in Pollard.
Yeah, I think, going deep down here onto Revin's follow-up here, trying to trade for Waddle as a potential long-term investment and to trim the fat on the wide receivers room. You have DJ Moore, Olave, Jamo, Ridley, Shakir, Odunze, and A.J. Brown. I would not trade Shakir. Joe said he's okay trading Shakir, trimming the fat. I want to keep Shakir because he is going to, and I believe I said this yesterday, he's a valuable piece of this offense. He's going to be a valuable piece of this offense going forward.
I'm not sure the offense is going to be valuable going forward. That's the problem I have with New Orleans moving forward.
No. You don't think Buffalo's going to be valuable?
Oh, that's Shakira. Sorry, I'm moving him in my head with Shaheed. No, you don't move Shakira. Move Ridley. Sorry, dude. In my head, I was hearing Shaheed. That's me being a dumbass. Sorry about that, guys.
I would
keep Shakira and move Ridley. Yeah.
I think you can move Ridley for Pollard. I honestly do. I think they had 2 terrible performances on the same week. They had 2 decent enough performances the week prior. And I think that you could probably, if worded correctly, you could probably move Ridley for Pollard. And if that's the kind of deal you wanted to do to go out and get a guy like Pollard, because I think the value for Pollard is around that Ridley value. That's a much better trade in my book because I think Shakir has better long-term value. You look at the usage for Shakir over the last several weeks, and you see where he's, him getting the targets, where he's getting the targets at. Just coming down here, if I'm looking at just total yards of wide receivers sitting here, Shakir's at 26th. He has 14 receptions, 168 yards. So, you see a couple weird names before him, but a name that I don't see before him is Calvin Ridley, right? I see Rome in the same discussion, DJ Moore in the same discussion, but if I'm looking, Calvin Ridley's sitting at 40 overall in terms of wide receivers, in terms of yards. When I look at Pollard, Joe, just coming down here looking at Tony Pollard, Pollard had a great, I believe, a great second week in terms of he got like 80 yards or so on the ground. Pollard is sitting there as the 23rd running back in terms of yards, getting a good amount of receptions and targets as well. I think I would first try to trade Ridley for Pollard. My next vote would be to move Jamo for Pollard. Those are the 2 guys that I would move off my team sooner than I would move Shakir.
And I agree with that, Bob.
So, Andre, 0-3 needs some desperate moves. what do I do? 12-team redraft, full PPR, Hurts. Hey, Abraham, we see you. Hurts, Kyron, Jacobs, Amon, Jaden Reed, Komet, Flex Higgins, benches Baker, Braylon Allen, Warren, Coleman, Kirk, Mark Andrews. So, I mean, right now, where I stand is something that Joe brought up earlier. I think it's okay to move a guy like Higgins, and I think it's okay to move a piece like Warren or even a piece like Braylon Allen, because I do think there are better weeks to come for a team like this. Hurts, Kyron, and Jacobs do have the potential to float, like, especially Kyron and Jacobs do have the potential to put up 80-yard games with a couple of touchdowns, maybe one touchdown here or there to get you into that kind of like 12, 15 kind of point range on a week-to-week basis. So I think you're going to be okay there. Jaden Reed, when Love comes back, I think will be an elite option. So I'm not ready to move on from Jaden Reed. When it comes to Cole Kmet and Mark Andrews, that's kind of the weakest spot on this position on your team right now, because we're buying into Cole Kmet right now, where he's equally as likely to put up a 0 as Mark Andrews. So if it were me, what I would try to build on for your team, while I would want because right now Jaden Reed might not be the most solid wide receiver 2 you can have. If I were you, I would try to pair Higgins and Allen, because they do have value to you right now. Maybe Higgins and Warren. I would try to elevate and try to get like somebody a little bit better than Komet, and then I might try to flip Komet with that good performance plus Kirk to try to upgrade your flex a little bit, because while I think Higgins can do well, he is also a second injury away from just not even wanting to play. And that's kind of just a head thing, not a stat thing, because he's wanting that money. It's going to come. So if I were you, guys, I would kind of look at right now would be a guy like Ken Walker. Again, that oblique injury could be a lingering thing for him, but he's definitely a buy low guy right now. Zach Charbonnet has looked elite, and he probably will continue to get some carries, but I think Walker could be a valuable asset right now. I think if I'm also looking to kind of move some players on my team, I'd still try to target Bucky Irving. I still think that I would definitely do something of that nature. If I'm coming and looking for a wide receiver, if I'm not sold on Jaden Reed or Higgins yet, I think that if I make a good enough package, you might right now be able to get Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is getting a good amount of looks, good amount of targets, is being used really well. I think if you're looking for a waiver wire addition, I think that, a guy like Michael Wilson is a guy that I would pick up, especially for this week. Alan Lazard is another waiver wire addition that I kind of would think about as well. Ideally, what I would want to do with your team, I would want to try to just get rid of Mark Andrews, try to move on from him. I don't think you can drop him, but he's super close to me wanting to drop him. He's one of those guys where you want to drop him, but because of the name and because of what he could do, you don't. I think that Mark Andrews right now is a definite sell for me. I don't want any.
He should be. You're right.
And I think you could probably pair Mark Andrews or Cole Kmet or with Higgins or even with Braylon Allen or with Jaylen Warren, because Braylon Allen, I think I'd rather have more than Jaylen Warren. I think if you pair those guys up, you could probably move into Stephon Diggs. If you could, have them bite on that a little bit more. You could probably try to maybe move a little bit into a Brian Thomas Jr. Ideally, you would try to also want to move into a Zay Flowers. I think all those guys are worth it.
So, Andre, I'm swinging over the fences here. You have two guys with great name recognition that are going to put up more in their name than they are in real life. That's Higgins and Andrews. And depending upon how your owners are and they're loving the name recognition, it would not be out of the world to see Higgins and Andrews for Chase. And that would be the kind of swinging for the fences that I would go for. The second trade I would recommend would be, again, swinging for the fences, combining Kareem and Coleman for Saquon. Saquon is a much safer long-term position.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you start that trade with Jacobs and Coleman, and you eventually accept Kareem and Coleman. But Jacobs is in a Saquon is in a much better position overall than Kareem. Kareem got incredibly lucky last week. The Rams had something like 110 penalty yards in their favor, and the Niners just kept putting them in the red zone. That Rams offensive line is still a disaster. This is the time to sell Kareem for his max value. So if you do that in Coleman for Saquon, again, I'd start with Jacobs because it'd be a bigger upgrade. Eventually accept Kareem and do the second trade of Higgins and Andrews. I would do that. You might need to throw in Warren as well, and I wouldn't worry about it. Just get a second.
Yeah, I think Joe's idea.
Go for the fences, man.
Yeah, Joe's idea here, Andre, is to take. I like that idea a lot, but I don't think it would be Coleman that you would trade. I think Saquon's having just a delightful season that you would probably have to trade Jacobs and Higgins at that point and try to sell Higgins' name. I don't think Coleman's worth enough to go from Jacobs and Coleman to Saquon, but Kyren and Coleman could, but you'd probably have to add in Warren as well. That would probably have to be a 3-player deal, which would maybe be a negative swing in your favor, but it could be a net positive because you'd probably be able to pick up a Lazard or a Michael Wilson off of free agency. So what I see right here is try to get something going to move. While I think Kyren is going to have good enough games coming down the stretch, and while I think Jacobs is going to have good enough games, if you can go out and get Saquon Barkley, who is just massively, valued right now, or even paying a little bit less, moving yourself into a James Cook, and trying to make a move to do Higgins and Warren for Cook. I think that I would like that a lot.
See, I do believe Higgins and Andrews can get you Chase for someone who's a name brand shopper.
Yeah, you can.
And that's the best thing you can get.
Of your league. Definitely depends on the structure of your league. So down in the chat, Andre, if you start putting some of those rosters down, we could probably piece something together. Jay, welcome. Would you trade ETN for Ayuk? I think I would. So what we said a couple episodes ago, I think is true for a lot of these players, is that there are players that need some time to acclimate to the game speed. And when that happens, it's usually players that have held out all offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And Ayuk just got paid. I mean, I read in some forums, they're not paying him to be a bum. And he's not a bum. It's just that right now, that when you look at what has happened over the course of the season so far, it's that has been other circumstances that led. I mean, Jennings is wide open for most of that game. Why wouldn't you throw it to Juwan Jennings, right? We thought that would be the big game for Brandon Ayuk. But what needs to be said is he still got 10 targets in that game. When Debo comes back, when Kittle comes back, he's still going to get targets in that game. It's a slow start. I want to tie myself to an offense that can move the ball, that can get into the red zone. Right now, with Jacksonville, it's rough. I mean, when we're coming up and looking at red zone stats for Jacksonville, this is probably going to be really, really gross.
Oh, it is, dude. It is.
When we look at attempts inside the 10, Travis Etienne has had 5 attempts inside the 10. When we just bring that out to inside the 20, he's had 10 attempts inside the 20. So let's see where that kind of ranks him in terms of red zone running backs across the league. So he's sitting here in terms of attempts. He's about 7th with 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, the games in which he did that in were against Miami and Cleveland. He faces Houston. I still like him against Indy. He plays Indy twice, and Indy in the playoffs if you have a Week 18 playoff. So that's something to really be considerate of. But I think that there is going to be a little rough sledding for ETN minus that Indy game that, I'd be willing to buy Ayuk. This to me also feels just like a lateral trade, right? I think that both.
Oh, I don't think it's lateral at all.
I think that both of these guys in the offseason, at least, were around the same rounds, right?
In ballpark, yeah.
Now we're getting out of that. And in terms of the struggles, is there similar struggles? It really, Jay, if I'm trading ETN out of Ayuk, I want to be confident in my running back room. So it seems like you're fairly confident in your running back room and not as confident in your wide receiver room. And that's why you're doing a trade like this. And I think that if that's the case, then do it, because both of these players have value. And I think Ayuk's going to have more value. But I just, if you think you can make the playoffs and you want to get that sweet Indianapolis matchup.
Yeah, but Indy's going to be week 18. That's a lot of people's after their championship's over.
That's a lot to wait on. Abraham, we see you. Bryce, we see you. Thanks for joining us. Top 5, we see you. Rumpel, we see you. RGQ, thanks for coming back. We see you. Let's get some of these questions in.
But to finish your point there, Ayuk is so much better long-term than ETN. If you can get that trade through, you take Ayuk there. All right, so would you trade Drake and Tyreek 1-for-1? You get Tyreek. I mean, that's not a debate, dude. Everyone's down on Tyreek, and I understand this, but there's a simple fact that has to be acknowledged. Tyreek is still one of the 3 best players in the league, period. And Drake London never, ever, 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 a million lifetimes from now, still will never, ever, ever be close to a top 20 player in this league. Yes, Miami doesn't have a great quarterback right now, but they supposedly have the smartest offensive mind in the world that will figure out how to get the ball back to Tyreek Hill. Yeah, 100%. If you can get Tyreek Hill for essentially an overrated receiver, you will 100% do that.
Yeah, that's not a question for me. If that's a trade that's propositioned to me, and if I went out there and I said, okay, I'm going to offer Drake London for Tyreek, and if they offer that to me, if they want to get Tyreek off my team and they want Drake London, I am more than willing to get Drake London off my team. Coming down the pipeline here, there's going to be some tough matchups. They draw San Francisco and Cleveland and Houston in the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15, 16, and 17. And the Jets in week 14 as you're approaching the fantasy playoffs. So there is reason to be concerned about Tyreek. However, when I look at your team and I have Lamb and Rice already, and I just add in Tyreek and I'm just getting that Tyreek juice on the back end if he happens to have a great game. Because the floor for Tyreek is the same as the floor for Drake London. But the ceiling for Tyreek is way more than the ceiling for Drake London, in my opinion. So, Tua probably isn't coming back, but, Huntley's not awful. If he can
he's a lateral passer.
If he can get the ball to Hill, which I'm pretty sure he will, if anything, this could probably turn into a 8 catches.
Because the other part is Tyreek's one of the few players in the league who can win a receiver screen game consistently. But the realistic truth here, Dominic, is that trade's probably never going through. You probably have to put in more than just Drake London to make it happen. And whether it be Dell or Wandell, that's fine. You probably want to stick it with whatever your backup running back is to push it over the top.
So, Carlos, onto your question here, or I can get Jonathan Brooks instead of Bucky. So, Joe is probably talking to you a little bit about this trade. I'm not, honestly, to tell you the truth.
It's a dynasty league, dude.
When we look at it as a dynasty league, that is, I don't really want Jonathan Brooks right now because he's already coming with that injury. He could be definitely elite. If I'm going for it and I can flip my first for Kenneth to another guy for Walker, I think by far and away you're getting this is basically saying Kyron.
Yeah, but so here was the answer I proposed to him instead of that. Would still do Kyren for Bucky the first and the second, but rather than flipping the first for Kenneth Walker, hold on to the first, knowing how stacked the running back draft is entering the NFL. Take both first round shots on there, because using 2 second-round picks or even a second-round pick can really upgrade your flex somewhere else. And I'm fine with running Bucky Irvin the rest of the year. You can get your second-round pick for a lottery pick like George Pickens or someone like that. That's what I would lean on doing.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's unique to think about when we think of dynasty, because Kareem's long-term dynasty value might not be as much, but Bucky's is definitely super high right now. So
and the other thing is Jonathan Brooks on Carolina. That team could blow it up 6 more times before he ever hits his prime.
Yeah, so I do like that a lot. I would see if I could get a little bit more, but I do like that a lot. Would you trade Dobbins for Pollard? I wouldn't, Mossy. I think that if I'm trading Dobbins and I'm getting back Pollard, I think it's fair enough, right? I think it's fair enough. Right now, Pollard is having a good enough season. Dobbins had a bad game, but a good enough and a great season so far, but with some injuries on the offensive line. Pollard and Tennessee is one of the weaker right now offenses in the league in our point of view. Chargers, without a healthy Herbert and without healthy offensive linemen, also a pretty weak offense. So,
but still ahead of Tennessee, though.
Yeah, when I look at this, there's a lot of things that you can say that this is a lateral enough move. So, what I would say to you, Mossy, is I would take a look at how I look at what those schedules look like, and you see that for Tennessee. Let me go back to these running backs here. For Tennessee, you're looking at a schedule that also is in the AFC South. Those teams are not very good right now. They play Indy twice. They play Indy during week 16. They play Washington week 13, Jacksonville week 14, and Indy week 6. So where I see this at is, although I like Dobbins a lot, and Dobbins I think has more big play potential here, the usage that Pollard is getting is, I'm fairly comfortable with that usage. I do think that as the season goes on, that Tajay Spears will get a little bit more work in this season. But I do like that he faces some really weak teams like Indy and Washington, Jacksonville, Indy and Jacksonville, and like Indy and Jacksonville in the playoffs is super nice. But
but they're too weak to do anything with it.
What I would want to do would be, if I'm buying Pollard, I probably want to buy him after this Miami game. I want to see what this offense kind of does against Miami right now, to see if those games against the Jets and the Chicago Bears were just like fluky-ish. I want to see him, and I want to buy him right before that Indy game. I want to buy him right before the Indianapolis game. And I think that's kind of where I fall on that. If I'm buying Pollard, I might not be trading Dobbins for Pollard, but I do want to buy Pollard for that Indy game specifically, because they're just absolute garbage water.
Well, there's no doubt. Indy can't stop the run to save their lives. But here's the bigger thing, and I get that you're kind of trying to justify getting rid of Dobbins. Not sure why you're there, but you're there. The thing that Pollard has that Dobbins doesn't is Pollard still has legitimate competition for his carries. Dobbins does not. Gus Edwards is a mile behind Dobbins. So I don't want to trade from a stable running game that wants to be a running game with the clear best back on the team for a team that doesn't know their identity, not sure Pollard's the best guy. It's a total downgrade no matter how you cut it. If you want Pollard, I mean, you should be giving up less than Jaylen Warren for Pollard. I think it's just you're giving away way too much for Pollard.
I think if I'm giving away something for Pollard right now, I think that fair value for Pollard right now would probably be in the vein of maybe like a Brian Robinson, or like a James Conner style player. I think I value James Conner higher. But
I do value Connor higher. But I can see Robbins. I can even see Singletary.
Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Quincy. Welcome, Jason. If you just joined us, Frizz, we'll be getting to all these questions, so stick with us as we go through them. So yeah, that's kind of the viewpoint there. So Lex, thanks for hitting the like button. If you haven't yet, please click the like button, subscribe, so that you get all the updates that we send out. Know when our episodes are airing. So I picked up the Titans D versus the Dolphins this week. Should I drop the Ravens D or Tajay to get Kendre Miller or Roschon? So I don't actually know if picking up the Titans defense is a good play this week. I do think that the Dolphins, when we look at the Dolphins as a total team, they definitely still have a lot of playmakers and Pro Bowl Scoop Huntley. But I don't think I'm playing the Titans against the Dolphins this week. I don't think the Titans are a good enough defense to do that, even with how weak the quarterback play could be here in Miami. When it comes to defenses, in terms of, do I drop the Ravens?
You absolutely should drop the Ravens defense. If Tajay Spears isn't in your league, he should be. We look at who the Ravens are playing the next 3 weeks. They're playing Buffalo. Buffalo going to score. They're playing the Bengals are going to score. And they're playing Washington, who just scores like crazy. So the Ravens defense has been very overrated henceforth. Now, arguably, you could say they played the hardest slate, but it doesn't get any softer on them, and they haven't been putting people away. So sitting on the Ravens D is not the greatest thing in the world. This is a very hard week for streaming, but here's the thing. 3 weeks from now, the Ravens D will probably still be available for a re-pickup. I'd rather have Tajay Spears in between, because there is a chance that Tennessee goes to Miami and just bakes in the sun, and Pollard does nothing, and Spears looks like the guy that they want to keep playing.
Yeah, and I would pick up Spears. I don't think Kendre's worth a pickup right now, and Roschon, anything on the Bears running game, I don't think is necessarily worth a pickup right now. So I would definitely drop the Ravens D for Tajay, and I think that's a pretty easy. Kind of selection. And you're not going to be mad about it because it's a defense. I mean, nobody.
So, really Amal, you are right.
Defenses. Yeah, they are.
Amal, you are right.
Yeah.
Huntley is going to be starting Sunday. But the thing is he's has the pattern.
So Huntley is starting on Sunday. I think that, when it comes to Huntley, like Joe was saying, that it's going to be a lot of, some of those weird passes, trying to get some people open. It's not going to be a very pretty game, but I think for a guy like Tyreek, you could be successful enough. I think there could be a lot of success for a guy like Tyreek. I think that Achane is going to probably have a good enough game this week as well. I was only worried about Tyreek because the quarterback situation, but they also play Tennessee, New England, then a bye week. So I don't see him producing for like 4 weeks. Yeah.
He's producing those 2 weeks there. He's producing those 2 weeks.
Yeah. This is kind of the way to think about it when it comes to the quarterback situation. He's producing there, and then seeing afterwards, you're seeing, okay, well, what does Miami's schedule look like after that? And you might be a little bit concerned about that there, but I think for the right price, I would buy Tyreek, and for the right price, I would sell Tyreek. This is the same kind of feeling that I had about Jamar last week before the blow-up game, is that if my lineup dictates that I need to get a little bit more mid-range value to fill out a couple positions because I'm struggling, I would sell a guy. But like the Dolphins, they play the Dolphins, the Colts, the Cardinals, and then they play the Bills and the Rams. So I'm looking at it and sitting here going, okay, that's going to be nice. They play the Titans, like you said, as well. That's going to be very nice. They play the Patriots doubling back. So I think that, the time to sell, if you have Tyreek and you want to sell him, might be around that November 3rd game, because I'm keeping him all throughout that rest of that time. And then unless I'm getting something crazy back in return, like a Bijan plus Shakir or something else that's like just simply an offer that I can't refuse. That's kind of like how I view.
So, Nino, I do want to say this larger point about Miami. And this is true for a lot of teams in the AFC, but Miami in particularly, because they are a team that will be willing to trade right now.
Hey, Dom. Hey, Jonathan. Welcome.
Is that you look at the AFC, there's only 5 teams right now that you basically can say, due to their record and how they're playing, they are in the playoffs. There's the Steelers are undefeated. And you look at it and go, where's the rest of the AFC North? None of them look like they are going to be able to come out and win. We just read your Baltimore schedule. Are you confident in the Buffalo Cincinnati for them to be anything more than 1-4? Mm-hmm. So when we look at this, Miami's sitting down there knowing they're one quarterback away from easily being the 6th seed. Mm-hmm. And it would not put it past me that they float some type of trade and either aggressively try to get one of these decent backups who can still win. Maybe even Russell Wilson from the Steelers, if they're comfortable with Fields, maybe Minshew, maybe even Flacco, to just get them through. But more importantly,
they might trade for Jameis too.
More importantly, what I believe is the most Daniels thing to do is they're going to force Tua to come back at the end of that bye, whether he's able to or not.
Yeah. I think Tyreek will be fine going forward. And if I can get Tyreek on my team, I will do it. And like I said, if I need other assets, I would trade Tyreek if that's kind of the thing. And Aman, what you're talking about here, Tyreek for Bijan. I think that a trade like this, if it's leaving you weak at wide receiver, and you're concerned about that, like I said, you can go out and pick up a Michael Wilson. You could go out and pick up an Allen Lazard. But if Bijan doesn't fit the framework of your team and you're just getting Bijan to get Bijan, I think that Bijan and Tyreek do have some of the biggest kind of upward ticks that could possibly happen for a player of their calibers, right? Bijan could easily have a 2-touchdown performance, 3-touchdown performance, 80 yards, maybe 100 yards, but he is kind of hamstrung by Cousins, right? So it just really floats through him. And Tyreek, similar situation. He's same thing with a different quarterback situation. Both of these players do have to overcome that and some of the play calling, but they're the best players on their team. And when push comes to shove towards the middle of the season, the cream does rise to the crop, as people say. And there's some great matchups here for the Dolphins. And if Tyreek continues to get 40 yards and 4 receptions in these great matchups, it's a concern. But I don't think that's going to happen because McDaniel will realize it, say, hey, I've got a chance to win this division. I've got a chance to make the wild card. And I can't keep starting Skylar Thompson and Huntley. I've got to go out and get another quarterback. And he's going to make the move to do it. They have the assets to do it. Whether that's maybe trading Jeff Wilson, Mostert.
Because here's the other thing with that regime. That regime down there is basically, if they don't perform, they're out. They have no qualms sending their draft capital, knowing that they won't be there anyway if this doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how we feel about it. So go out and get Tyreek if you can. You don't have to sell Tyreek.
This is the best time to buy Tyreek.
You don't have to sell him right now. Kirk, Watson, or Lockett for a flex this week. Looking at what's happening across the league, knowing that Seattle is playing Detroit, and knowing that Brian Branch is injured, knowing that Frank Ragnow might be dealing with a very significant injury, which would really be terrible for the Detroit offensive line. But knowing that Lockett is still getting enough targets in these games to stay relevant, I think that I'm not starting Christian Watson unless Jordan Love is playing. I just want to get that kind of off my chest there. And Christian Kirk, I really realistically don't want to start at all. When it comes down to it, I think that Tyler Lockett is getting enough usage and enough yards that he's worth a start. So that's kind of how I feel, especially against a defense that might have lost Brian Branch for this week as well. I think that if I'm going for a flex play this week, Lockett's my guy out of those. We appreciate
absolutely, no doubt.
We appreciate you, Carlos. Start Stroud, Gibbs, Ramondre, Chase, Nico, McBride, Etienne with Daniels. I think sending Daniels Eckler for Connor. So I did throw back in the chat earlier in a comment, Camden, earlier this morning about how I thought about this trade. So Joe, you can kind of chime in on this as well.
So off the bat here, Daniels and Eckler for Connors and Bucky, I would do that. I would do, and I think it might be. I think that's one of the ones. Not only would I do that, would be accepted from both sides. I normally don't like picking up 2 players at the same position, but knowing that Eckler is essentially done, and Bucky's the future, it gives you good balance if you get either a Connor injury or Ramondre. But what I would then plan to do is take ETN and take another receiver on your bench and upgrade a receiver. That's what I would recommend to do there, Caden. I think that this is a great starting spot, but now you have 5 running backs, and you don't need 5 running backs. So I would use one of them again, whether it be Connor or ETN, that's your call. Upgrade for another amazing piece and just ride yourself into the playoffs because this is a very, very strong team.
Yeah, and what I also suggested is I believe is going and moving on from like you stated, moving on from Ramondre and ETN. You know, it's kind of a lateral move at that point to move from either Ramondre or ETN, I think, to Connor, because I think all three of them have their concerns.
Mhm.
But like I said in my comment, Connor is on the best offense.
He
So
is.
if I'm on the best offense, even if I have concerns for this player, I think that the volume will kind of speak for itself there. Ramondre is definitely going to have some good games. ETN is definitely going to have some good games. There's a very good chance, like I said, if Trevor Lawrence gets his head out of his ass, that ETN could have 2 touchdown games again, like we had last couple weeks or a couple like last season, right? But right now that's not happening. And you're moving Daniels and Eckler for Connor and Bucky, and I think that that's an incredible trade, especially considering you're maximizing Daniels right now. You're getting 2 very, very solid running backs. And then, you know, like Joe said, going in then and trying to flip, say, Ramondre and somebody else to really, really upgrade to at another position. I think that I would do Daniels and Eckler for Connor and Bucky.
Yeah, even if it's Ramondre for an injured piece. Like if you can do Ramondre right now for Debo, that's a win. You just gave yourself the extra excess of the running backs. Ramondre for Debo would really upgrade this team as you look at your championship. We understand that you're 1-2 right now, but I think that you put these dots together, you're winning the championship.
Yeah, I think it's totally possible that happens. This is
because you could do Ramondre for Debo right now. That's not a crazy trade.
This is a team that just run into some bad luck. It's a good team, right?
Yeah.
It's just run into bad luck. Need one flex, 305 Raider. Higgins, JMO, Ford, or Quentin Johnston. I think right now I'm pumping the brakes on Quentin Johnston until I learn a little bit more about what the quarterback situation is going to look like this week. Ford, to me, you know, he's been one of those guys where we've been kind of playing around with, oh, yeah, it could be worth a start, could be worth a sit.
Ford should be traded because he's a pain in the ass to figure out if you want to play him.
Yeah, Ford right now, it's getting to the point right now where he's getting enough yards where he could be worth a start. But again, he missed practice this week. He just missed practice with a knee injury. And when you look at what he's doing in half PPR leagues, and in PPR leagues, it's not like anything to write home about. After week 1, he had 18 points, and then the last 2 games, 10 points and 7 points. Vegas is a beatable team. Washington's a beatable team. But I think this week I'm not starting Ford, especially knowing with that knee injury and them already being cautious using him. Weirdly enough, I'm not starting him. So I'm not starting Quentin Johnston. I'm not starting Ford. Circling back then, you know, you have JMO and Higgins. You look at that, the possibility for both of these players. JMO got blanked this past week, which was rough, but we kind of talked about that might happen because he has that big play potential. When I look at this game, Detroit and Seattle, I do think that JMO is going to be more involved in this game. The line's set at 3.5 right now with an over and under at 46.5. When it comes to Higgins, I think that Higgins could get involved very heavily against Carolina, especially if they're going to have to play a Carolina that's going to have to catch up against Carolina, which could be a weird thing to say. So I think with all that said, I think that JMO offers you the biggest big play potential this week out of those 4 guys. And I think that Higgins offers you a decently solid player in a good matchup for this team. So I think if I'm going for the gusto, I'd take JMO. If I am comfortable with a solid enough floor, I think I would take, if I'm looking for a floor, I'd take Higgins. If I'm looking for a boom, I would take JMO.
So Raider, I'm taking Higgins regardless. He's the best player of that group, no doubt about it. And we love seeing all you guys responding. We will get to all of you here. We see a lot of guys giving us follow-up questions. Bryce, we haven't given you a shout out yet, or Ben. Bob's going to take you home. I do need a bounce here, guys. Bob's got you, and he will take care of you. Make sure we take care of Steve and his big-ass buy-in, too.
Yeah, so Steve, flexing. Amari Cooper, Ford, Steele, and Zamir White. So, Steve, I don't think Zamir White is worth a flex at all. Even given the situation that he's been in, I think he's burned us a lot this year so far. And his usage doesn't dictate that he's worth a flex. Out of these guys, with Amari Cooper, he did have that great game, 2 touchdowns last week. It's possible with some of the injuries to the back half of Vegas, with some injuries on the defensive line, that Amari Cooper would be the best play out of that bunch this week. I think how I would rank it in terms of what I could see happening, I think that the Chargers have a good enough run defense right now that Carson Steele is still a play for me, because I think the volume that I saw this week was really, really, really good. It was what we expected, about 70 yards. If he gets a touchdown, it's going to be nice for Steele. I think how I would rank them this week would be Amari and then Steele. But I would really definitely need to check on a couple of those injuries, especially when we consider the Chargers' offensive woes. I think I might, if all those injuries to the Chargers' offense are a thing, and we find out that Justin Herbert really isn't playing, and they maybe have to go Easton Stick or somebody else, Steele could be in a very smashed spot, because he's going to run that game out, and it's very likely that Steele goes over 100 yards today, or over 100 yards on Sunday, if Mahomes is trying to run out the clock in that game. So for me right now, I say Amari and Steele, but I would definitely continue to check back with the injuries to both teams, because I think Steele could definitely flip me over the top on that one. So right now I'm Amari and then Steele, but check the injuries, because it could end up Steele and Amari. But I think Zamir and Ford aren't even in the conversation. Rams, welcome. Dynasty full PPR, super flex. Start 11, 12 teams, 6 points passing, touchdown. Team has been bad so far, but a lot of young talent. Should I trade Kyler, Caleb, and Rome for Mahomes, Puka, and either Stafford or Rodgers? No. That doesn't help you at all, Rams. When I look at your roster, RGQ, Miggy, we see everybody down in the chat. When I look at your roster, your talent is so incredible. You have Kyler and Caleb. Now, we're not big Caleb guys right now, but Caleb can turn out to be into something really nice, and Rome. And you're searching for Mahomes. You can ask a couple of viewers that when we were talking about Mahomes, but Mahomes right now, in terms of fantasy stats, is providing us with very mid numbers, because this team has looked very, very good. He hasn't had to be the Patrick Mahomes that we're relying on from a fantasy perspective. So I wouldn't go out there, and I wouldn't go out and get Patrick Mahomes right now. Puka right now could be a valuable asset to you in the future. Absolutely, 1,000%. But again, Mahomes has finished as the 15th, 14th best quarterback so far this year. There are going to be better games to come. Absolutely. But I'm not going out there and buying Mahomes right now when you have a guy in Kyler and Caleb that could potentially in that future provide you with that elite upside. And starting both of them, especially considering it's a super flex, I think is great. Stafford and Rodgers both provide you the chance to win now. But again, they're old. They might not be in the league for much longer. It's not great there. And Puka would be the guy I would go after. Maybe I would only trade 2 of those pieces for a guy like Puka, and then getting back Stafford or Rodgers on the back end. Maybe you don't believe in Caleb. Maybe you don't believe in Rome on the comeback. But Rome is healthy right now. Puka's not. So at least Rome is going to help you in the interim until a guy like Puka would come back. Puka doesn't really help you right now. So if you're willing to jettison some players, maybe you throw Caleb and Rome for Puka out there, for Puka and Stafford to get you kind of some help in the interim. But I think you should stand pat. I don't think you should do this trade. You're giving up too much young talent. Too much young talent is what you're giving up here. So I don't think I would do that trade, Rams, especially considering that Mahomes is only finishing 15th best quarterback on a week-to-week basis. So it's not really hey, Adrian, we see you. It's not really anything to write home about. Don't buy into the Patrick Mahomes name right now. Great NFL quarterback, legendary NFL quarterback, but right now for fantasy, it's not something I want to buy into. Binks, which side are you taking in a PPR redraft? Chase and AJB for Nico and Neighbors. God, Binks, that's a really hard question, man. How I see this could go a couple of ways. Neighbors looks amazing. Nico, we know, is great. Nico's on a one of the best passing volume teams in the league. Chase is Burrow's boy. Chase is always going to get the ball. As long as Burrow is healthy, Chase is getting the ball. As long as A.J. Brown is healthy, Hurts is going to get him the ball as much as he can. Hamstring injuries can be a little bit tight to kind of manage. Neighbors, however, has been hot. We all know this, and I think if this is a redraft league, if I am worried about A.J. Brown's injury, I think that a Nico Neighbors flip would be acceptable to me. I don't, like we said a couple of episodes ago, I don't know how long Neighbors keeps this up. There's a very good chance that Neighbors could have a couple of dud games in there as well. But this team is running really well through Neighbors and Singletary, and they look a little bit different than what we saw last year, right? Neighbors is providing a little bit of a spark. If teams start figuring out Neighbors, that could provide a little bit of a challenge here to this side, to the Nico Neighbors side. For me, I think for the rest of the season, I would rather have Chase and A.J. Brown, but it's really, really close, even with that injury. More likely what I would try to do is not do something big like this, Binks, is maybe I would try to move A.J. Brown and another piece for Nico. Because I think you're going to have to pay too much for Neighbors right now. He's basically an untouchable asset for most people. I think you're going to have to pay too much for Neighbors. So I think where I would go is I'd keep Chase, maybe try to move A.J. Brown in a piece for Nico and allow him to keep Neighbors. That's how I feel about it. You feel free to drop some more information down in the chat. Jonathan, trade Gibbs and Bowers for JT and Waddle, trying to get away from this bye week 5. Need to wins now, and my wide receivers are already decent. Yeah, I mean, a trade like this, Jonathan, when we looked at your team from the past, I'm all for moving into Jonathan Taylor. Hey, Sean, what's up? I'm all into moving into Jonathan Taylor. A Gibbs to Jonathan Taylor, especially with an injury to Ragnow this past week, makes sense if you're worried about how that will affect the communication on the offensive line. Bowers is an incredible asset. If you have the ability, like I think you do, because I believe you have McBride, to get out of Bowers and trade him for a piece like JT, Waddle's just kind of the icing on the cake. Waddle should be okay, but he's also a player I'm willing to trade out of. So you might even be able to flip Waddle for something else. This is a trade that I like. This is a trade that I would do because I do value JT, and the fact that Anthony Richardson has been super inefficient, it just makes more sense that JT is going to be seeing the ball a lot more. Revin, trying to trade for Waddle as a potential long-term investment. Yeah, we talked about this. The guy I would trade would be Ridley and JMO. And like we said about Jonathan here, getting Waddle right now could be very valuable. He's also a guy that would probably be easy to move out of if you wanted to, if you could. Miggy, getting Lazard, like I said, Lazard put up a 26-point week in week 1 in PPR. He put up a dud in week 2, and then he put up a pretty good game in week 3. He's Aaron Rodgers' guy. And this is a game where Patrick Surtain is probably going to be covering very significantly Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson is the most talented player on the field. But Lazard's going to get his, and I think it's very easy to say that Lazard could have a 20-point game here. I'm not writing it out of the possibility that he goes for 2 touchdowns the way that Aaron Rodgers feeds him the rock. Should I do Josh Jacobs for Malik Neighbors gaming? If you can make that happen, I would do it. If you can make that happen, gaming, I would completely do that. Looking at when I know your team to be, I think that like getting this type of talent, if you can do this, Josh Jacobs for Malik Neighbors, I'd do it. I don't think it would get accepted because Malik Neighbors has insane value right now. But if the person is struggling at running back, Josh Jacobs is the type of player that they might want to take on because he does have a decent amount of volume right now. I think you might have to offer Jacobs and another piece for Neighbors, but it's definitely worth playing with. Malik Neighbors has a lot of value right now. The highest value it's going to get, it really can't get any higher unless you're in a dynasty league. George, do we still trust Dallas's defense tomorrow? I don't. We appreciate it, George. We appreciate it. It's nice to have a dialogue with people about fantasy football because we're all trying to win, right? Every one of us wants to win. And so when we put our combined powers together, more wins will come. sometimes bad weeks happen. Bad weeks, we can go up against the highest points for in the week, even if we have the second highest points for in that given week. So it's just nice to talk to people. So we appreciate that, George, a lot. Do I trust Dallas's defense this week? No, I don't. Dallas's defense is built on the turnover. Daniel Jones is capable of giving a turnover, but I don't know if in this game, if there will be all those opportunities to do that. So while Trayvon Diggs will probably be on that side of the field with Neighbors a decent amount of time, if not the whole game, I really don't. I think this is a game where Wan'Dale Robinson could really show out and shine out. He's getting a lot of targets, doing what he can with the targets that he's given. I think Dallas's defense is not trustworthy. They've been basically blown out in almost every single game. It felt like. I would not start Dallas, and I don't think they're trustworthy. We appreciate you, George, here. Also, picked up Roschon Johnson. So good things last week, maybe worth a stash because Swift looks awful. Swift looks absolutely putrid. The running game for the Bears is basically a non-existent asset at this point in time. Picking up Roschon Johnson, if your roster allows it, it works. We talked earlier in the episode about, how Roschon Johnson might not be the ideal pick, but if he's there, he's definitely worth picking up, especially with all these injuries, right? And knowing that you have a guy like Jalen Wright, Corum, and all that, those guys are moving down while Roschon is moving up. And I think that's something important to consider there. It's very difficult to get Bijan right now. The assets have to be great. The Gibbs Mason for Bijan and Marvin Harrison, that's a trade that you're getting great assets back, and a person just probably doesn't want to move them. And so that's kind of the idea here, right? Trade Ayuk for Godwin. What do y'all think? I think both of these guys have a lot of value. Godwin is continuing to get the targets. We've been saying episode after episode that Godwin is going to have bad games. There's going to be a time where you're going to see a game that's really bad, but the volume that he's giving is really, really nice. You're probably going to end the year with a Chris Godwin, maybe in that 75 to 85, maybe 90 now, maybe up to 100 target or 100 receptions for Chris Godwin. And he can do a lot with them. He's probably going to end the season with maybe 1,000, maybe 1,200 yards in that kind of time frame or in that yardage frame, with probably 7 to 8 touchdowns. The more he looked, the better he's looked better on a week-to-week basis. He did get that volume from Denver because Mike Evans was basically non-existent. Do I trade Ayuk for him? Ayuk for Godwin, I think, is a trade that people would consider. But with Godwin being one of the best wide receivers in the league right now and Ayuk not living up to that, I don't know if it would get accepted. Who would I rather have? I think that Ayuk and Godwin are definitely two players that could throw up very big games like they've shown in the past. For my money, I'd rather have Ayuk right now because, again, you're already buying Godwin when he's already given us all those a decent amount of touchdowns already. And Ayuk hasn't given it to us yet. So you'd be buying into the touchdowns. So you'd be taking the possibility for less when Ayuk offers you the chance to get, a bit more. Right now, Chris Godwin has 3. I'm still projecting him between, like I said, 7 and 9. So you take that over the course of the whole season, and Ayuk is probably going to end up with between 6 to 8 touchdowns, somewhere in there. So again, think about it in framework of that. Abraham, how's it going? I have Lamar, Jefferson, London, Kyron, K9, Kittle, Ridley, Javonte, McLaughlin, Dobbs, Lockett, Ty Chandler. I'm looking to improve my flex mainly for any run back. Any trade suggestions? So Abraham, here's how I feel about this. I feel that when I look at this team, Marlon, I see you. 9-3, I see you. Top 5, I see you. We'll get to your questions very, very soon. Abraham, where can I improve? I think you got to, this whole Denver running back situation, Tyler Batty, McLaughlin, Javonte Williams, Audric Estime when he comes back, is a situation I don't want to be a part of. This is a situation where, you're never really going to start one of these guys, logistically speaking. So I think what I would do is I would try to move, seeing, the injuries you got happening with your team. I would try to move on from London and try to see what I could get for London and Javonte Williams. See if I can move into something a little bit better performing. You might have to move London and K9 and try to get something back on the back end. But I think realistically, what you might want to be shooting for right now to improve your flex would be to go after a guy like Shakir. I think that Shakir is a guy, a lower level guy who's usually a piece in a trade. I think going out there and getting Jaden Reed is a great idea. I think going out there and getting a guy like Diggs is also a great idea. You can put something together that's kind of, Javonte Williams has no value right now. McLaughlin has no value right now. So they're just kind of a back end piece if they want a running back. I think that if I were you and I'm trying to move into something, I think that a London and maybe even Goddard with the great game that he had, but maybe a London and Kittle could move you into something really nice. A London could probably move you into Zay and something else. A London could definitely move you into a Terry McLaurin and something else if you want a wide receiver back on the back end. I suggest trading for Ken Walker, but in your instance, you can also trade out of Ken Walker. You compare Ken Walker and London and probably go after a Diggs plus a Montgomery, which gives you some long-term value there. You could probably also, the problem is some of these running backs, they're just not having a great enough season. You might want to target Aaron Jones. You might want to target Josh Jacobs. See what those owners want to throw out to you. Najee could be a guy that you target on the back end. Maybe you do like a Najee Shakir for something else. And I think Ridley's a guy that you can move as well. So that's kind of my initial suggestion, Abraham, and we can kind of talk more about that as we go. Yeah, George, I'm with you. A hold for Ayuk if your team allows for it, right? With Shakir, yeah. You have Kincaid and Allen, Revin. You are putting a lot of cards in there, but it's a good thing. That's a good offense to have a lot of cards in. It's kind of like, buying into the Miami offense a couple years back or buying into the Higgins Chase show a couple years back. It's good to have the good pieces of a good offense. Right now, if you're buying Nico, it's okay to have Diggs, right? All of these things, it's good to buy into offenses that are going to spread the ball around and going to get different pieces to different people. Traded Kirk for Pittman, still have Amon, Godwin, and London. So how I feel about that, Bryce, I don't really want Pittman, but I think moving Kirk for Pittman is kind of like a lateral move here. I think that Pittman does kind of have some upward potential, but he's gotta give you more. So I don't think I would start Pittman, but you don't have to. You have Amon, you have Godwin, and you have London. I think that's really nice. Thoughts on Rashad White and Javonte Williams? Scared they're losing running back one depth chart spot. They are. Bryce, they absolutely are losing their positions. Rashad will still be involved in the passing game. Rashad will still be there. They'll still be there, but we'll definitely, Aiden, I see you there. I think what I see from these two players is that they're players that I'm willing to trade, but they're not worth much. So unfortunately, you're probably going to have to hold White or pair him with a very, very good asset to move yourself up the board. But for you, Bryce, I think right now that you probably could move a disappointing asset like Pittman and Rashad White and maybe move yourself into something where people might believe in those two players. You might be able to move yourself into a Monty. You're going to keep hearing me say Monty because he's a piece that I do want on my team. You might be able to move them into a Najee who has a better chance to perform on the back end. And you could probably move Rashad White and something else into a Tony Pollard. I think you could probably do something like that. Would you trade Worthy for Pollard, Mossy? I think if I'm trading Worthy, Pollard is a nice asset to get back, but I do think Worthy has a lot of long-term potential over the course of the season. If this season gets out of control, Pollard might not be the guy that they lean on. They could start to get more reps to Tajay Spears because he's the younger guy. I think that I'd rather hold Worthy, but I do see that Pollard has that nice schedule. So I'm willing, if I'm giving up anything, I think that Worthy is an asset that is worth trading for Pollard. But I do value Worthy a little bit more than I value Pollard. That's kind of just my opinion on that. Top five. So thoughts on Keenan Allen, Judy or Lazard, and down here, I saw you mention here about you having Gibbs as well. So when I look at these three players, who would I rather have? I'd rather have Allen Lazard right now. Allen Lazard is Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. He was basically his favorite target in Green Bay. He came over with him. He was going to be his favorite target last year. Then he got hurt. Now he's with him again this year. I think that Lazard has a good holding pattern for the rest of the year. Judy had a nice target share. Then, he basically, the game kind of didn't go the way for Judy in this game. Keenan Allen, I don't really know what Keenan Allen's worth because Keenan Allen has been hurt. And that's kind of the framework of Keenan Allen. If he comes back, Caleb Williams will find him and he could be absolutely electric. But I think in the order in which I like those guys, in terms of like the value here, like again, Judy had 7 targets, only caught 4 balls and only did it for 27 yards. I think for me right now, I have Lazard above Judy and Keenan Allen, but I think that Jerry Judy, if he continues to get a decent amount of volume, and he will end up doing something with them, but I don't think it's going to be super exciting. So I think he's a very back end flex play. And right now I think that Lazard is a very firm flex play. So for me, I'd rather have Allen Lazard out of those 3. Rumpel, I see you here. So my receiving room is hurting. Any trade suggestions? 12-man, 0.5 PPR, Hurts, Barkley, Gibbs, Waddle, Pickens, Kincaid. Bills defense benches Braylon Allen, Bucky and Irving, Brandon Cooks, Judy, Kirk. And so here's some trade suggestions here. So Rumpel, we got you. So when I look at this, hey Scooby, welcome. Hey Marlon, we'll definitely get to your question. So when I see what you got here, Rumpel, I think that right now, if I'm moving on from any players on, I think your assets you can build something really nice here. So I think something that I would think about doing, I'm all for trading into Gibbs, just so everybody knows, even with the Frank Ragnow injury, I do still like Gibbs. However, I think Gibbs is the asset on your team that will probably give you the most and is the guy that is tradable the most. I think if you were to trade Gibbs, you could probably return value in the same frame of a Nico. You could probably move Gibbs and move into you could probably trade Gibbs and Pickens and move into an Amon-Ra. I think that something like that definitely puts yourself up for something really good in the future. I think that Kirk right now, if I'm looking at your team and I'm looking for a lower down trade to kind of make here, I think that maybe I try to move Kirk and try to pick up Shakir somewhere along the line. See if you can float Kirk and something else there for Shakir. I think that I'd like to move into Zay Flowers still. I think that Deontay Johnson, after that big week, is worth moving into. We'll see how much actually comes of that. Surprisingly enough, Terry McLaurin's one of those assets that also is worth trading out of or into, depending on how you think the future looks for them. And when we look at just how the season's going, it might just be that Brandon Cooks is worth a drop. I'm not ready to give up on Brandon Cooks yet, but again, he hasn't really showed me much. They haven't been really going the ball towards Cooks as much. Last year, I think he had about 700 yards and about 8 touchdowns. That's what we were buying when we bought into Cooks this year. So if I am trying to upgrade at wide receiver, here, Rumpel, I definitely would want to try to, move in to get something like that. Now, when it comes to the back end here with Kincaid and the Bills defense, I think that's solid. So I think your team is solid in a lot of kind of frameworks, right? But I think that if I'm upgrading anything, I'm upgrading that Pickens. I think Pickens is still going to do well. I'm upgrading that Pickens by moving Gibbs and maybe trying to get a Devontae Adams and Monty to kind of float around on my team a little bit more. And I think your team is very, very solid, or maybe an Ayuk and Monty kind of situation. That's kind of the value that I'm looking at. You can also move out of Josh Jacobs if you don't think the volume is going to be there. Josh Jacobs could definitely return you a decent receiver, and you could probably get a back end sneaky running back. Maybe you could get a Devin Singletary plus a nice wide receiver for Josh Jacobs, maybe even more. But I definitely suggest trying to upgrade that Josh Jacobs instead of downgrading him. So definitely think about that. We can talk more about it for sure. So coming here, RGQ, I can't get any trades done. What can I get for Pittman and Ford? Keep in mind, this is a work league with a lot of casuals. So RGQ, when I look at this, I think you could probably do a Pittman Ford for Higgins. I think it'd be worth it too, because Ford, again, injury plus the playing time looks weird. Pittman, no injury, but the playing time is not something worth it, right? So when we look at this question, Elijah, I see you. Marlon, I see you. Rumpel, you're welcome. Absolutely, you're welcome. Steve, we got you. Don't worry about it. So coming back up to this question here, RGQ, which players should I trade Pittman and Ford for? For which players? Olave, Worthy, Jennings, Higgins, Keenan, Terry, Khalil, JMO, Brian Thomas Jr. What is most likely to get done? Unfortunately, I don't think Pittman and Ford could get you Olave right now. I think Olave is doing much better than Pittman and Ford, and I don't think the Olave owner will give them up. I don't know if it's worth moving into Jennings, but I do think it's fair enough that if I'm going out there and getting an asset, I think what you suggested, Pittman and Ford for Higgins, people might still be wanting to buy into Pittman. You're giving two assets for an asset that could potentially be great. Now, RGQ, like we talked about earlier, Pittman could be one of those guys that definitely struggles. Higgins could be one of those guys that struggles coming back, and if he's injured again, that could be kind of the end of his season. But Pittman and Ford are really diminishing returns for you right now. So I think right now, out of the players that you listed right here, what could I get done? I think that you could move into a Terry McLaurin with a Pittman and Ford, and you probably get something back on the back end. You might be able to do, Worthy and Khalil Shakir for Pittman and Ford. You could probably get something like that done because Worthy hasn't turned out a good game yet. Hunter, welcome back. Mike, I see your question. We'll definitely get to it. Bob B, we'll get to your question as well. So where I fall on that RGQ is if I'm moving Pittman and Ford, maybe shoot for Higgins, but more likely you're probably going to be able to do Worthy and McLaurin. And I think I'd be happier with Worthy and McLaurin more than Pittman and Ford. So that's kind of where I fall on that. Coming back up here, Frizzle, I got offered Baker, Waddle, Chase Brown, Cup for Murray, Olave, and Mixon. So 14-man standard, my initial thought was to decline the offer, but wanted another opinion. My initial thought is to also decline that offer. I understand it's a 14-team league, but I'm really not selling Murray at this point in time. I do want to buy into Waddle, I think, if the price is right, and I'm willing to buy into Cup if the price is right, but this price is not right. Chase Brown really isn't worth anything, even in a 14-man league right now. So, even just cutting that out, that's Cup, Waddle, and Baker for Murray, Olave, and Mixon. And I think Murray, Olave, and Mixon right now is the better combination. Mixon, if he comes back and he ends up being healthy, he's going to get great volume and he's going to be a beast. So I would hold tight and I would just kind of wait until another offer comes and strikes me. Hey, Mr. Wumbo. Yeah, Pittman has really goofed me too. It's just like, in the offseason, there was a couple players we missed on, but one of the guys that we did not want at any stretch of the imagination was Michael Pittman. The volume is not there. Anthony Richardson just does not look good for Michael Pittman. And Michael Pittman's not the deep threat. Anthony Richardson throws a deep ball. He's not getting involved, and it's really terrible to see because he's a talented player. Traded London and Mason from Malik Neighbors. Already have Saquon Gibbs and Aaron Jones. Good trade. Yeah, absolutely, D-Ben. If you've been with us watching over the last couple of weeks, Mason is a hold for us right now. We love Mason right now. He's on a good offense. He's getting volume. It looks great for him. But this is the type of trade that you can swing it because you already had Saquon Gibbs and Aaron Jones, and they're already fairly prolific. That owner is probably really happy right now to get Mason in London, but I know you're equally happy to get Neighbors, D-Ben. Neighbors is putting up elite numbers, and there's going to be a point in the season where those numbers are going to go down, but they're most likely going to go down to a floor of 10 or 11 points because he gets so many targets. So he's going to have a valuable role on your team moving forward. I think this is a really good trade, and I always think it's good to move out of London because, again, Malik Neighbors' floor and London's floor, Malik Neighbors has a higher floor than London. He's a better all-around talent than Drake London right now. So I don't like that I gave up Mason. But I do like moving into Neighbors in that situation. Jason, will you trade McBride, Quentin Johnston, or Sutton for Stevenson and Pittman? Again, Jason, I don't want to do anything that moves me into Michael Pittman, and I really don't care about Sutton. So, for me, this is moving into Stevenson. My running backs are Mixon, Kamara, and Pacheco. Yeah, you need a running back. I think it would be fair enough to offer McBride and Sutton for Stevenson and Pittman. Sutton has been disappointing. McBride is hurt. Stevenson, disappointing. I think, Jason, if I were you, I'd be okay offering this trade, McBride and Sutton for Stevenson and Pittman. Although, like I said, I don't want to move into Pittman for your sakes. You need a running back, and you're just trying to get a back end. You're just trying to get a wide receiver back. I think a trade like this will probably go through. You're giving a nice asset with an asset who is stronger on an offense that may have some problems in the next coming weeks. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Let me plug in my iPad here, everybody. So when I look at that, that's kind of how I would think about that. So that's where I'm at on that, Jason. I would do that trade, but I wouldn't really be happy that I got Pittman back. Any insider knowledge on how Kittle's doing? From what I know right now, it's looking like right now that this is going to be probably another missed game for Kittle. We'll see where it shines through, but Purdy's hurt, Kittle's hurt, so I'm definitely excited, but he's limited. The hamstring's limiting. He's a little bit older, so it's going to take some time to get past it. So I don't know if he's going to play this week. I really don't think he's going to play. I hope he plays, but I don't really think he's going to play with what we know about practices. He's at practice, but again, it says he was running routes at full speed as he works his best to get back from the hamstring injury. So again, take that for what it's worth. It is Wednesday. We will know more by Saturday. I think Kittle won't play, but if he does play, it might be very limited. What did you trade Kelsey for Pitts? No, I don't want Kelsey and I don't want Kyle Pitts, Quincy. So, how I fall on that, if I'm trading Travis Kelsey, hey, Dylan, what's up? Hey, Flash. Yeah, I just saw that. So Brock Purdy was a full go. So I like to hear that, especially for the sake of Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings. Do I trade Kelsey for Pitts? No, I don't. I don't want any part of Pitts. I don't want any part of Kelsey. If I'm moving Kelsey, I'm moving him with a piece to move into something better. Maybe I'm trying to move into a Ferguson. Maybe I'm trying to move into a Sam Laporta, something of that nature. Maybe I want to move into a Dallas Goedert. But I am not moving into Kyle Pitts. So that's kind of the long and short of that one, Quincy. I don't want any part of Kyle Pitts, and I don't want any part of Travis Kelsey. And the metrics back up both of those statements. With where they're ranked. And, Kyle Pitts has 105 yards, but again, 2 of 5 for 59 yards. It's really not a glowing review of what the season has been. Number 12 tight end on the year in terms of yards. Zach Ertz has more yards than him, which is crazy to think about. Mike Gesicki has more yards than him. You might be able to move into a Brock Bowers too, Quincy, but not just for Kelsey. Would you trade Jalen Waddle and Javonte Williams for Brian Robinson Jr.? Could also do Michael Pittman or Christian Kirk instead of Waddle. I would move Michael Pittman and Javonte Williams for Brian Robinson Jr., my guess. I don't want to move Waddle right now unless I'm getting a decent return for Waddle. Again, it has to be the right price. Javonte Williams is worth nothing to me, and he's worth basically nothing to the Broncos right now is the way it looks. Michael Pittman, again, there could be better days, but I'm not willing to tie my team waiting for those better days, especially if I'm 1-2, 0-3, something like that. I would move Pittman, I would move Javonte, and I would try my best to move into Brian Robinson. I don't know if those two guys will get you into Brian Robinson, but I could definitely you might have to push Kirk instead of Pittman, but I wouldn't move Waddle and Williams for Robinson. I would move either Kirk or Pittman for them. I'd try Pittman first and maybe eventually fall into Kirk. I got Higgins by trading Pittman and Sutton thanks to you. Yeah, dude. like I said, we've been talking a lot about Higgins. We've been talking a lot about Pittman. Higgins is one of those guys that it's worth trading into if the value is right. I am very much okay trading Michael Pittman, a depreciating asset, Sutton, a non-asset, because Josh Reynolds has basically more yards and targets on the year for a guy like Higgins. Even if Higgins does end up getting injured or something like that, you still got 2 depreciating assets off your team. You freed up a roster spot to potentially go after a guy like Alan Lazard or Michael Wilson on the waiver wire. So I'm all for something like that, Dom. I'd love to hear something like that happen for you. Thoughts on Najee this week? I think Najee this week is a start if he's able to shake the injury tag. So if he's able to shake the injury tag and, and is feeling good, looks good, I'm willing to start him. Again, we won't really know. Najee did not practice today. If he practices Friday, that's looking good for us that Najee is going to play. If he practices Thursday and Friday, that's looking even better if there's no setback. I am on Najee this week to play. But if he doesn't play and Warren doesn't play, I would go out and pick up Cordarrelle Patterson. That's kind of my viewpoint on that situation. Just traded Pacheco for Tank Dell and just traded Tank Dell for Zach Moss. Thoughts? Love it. Zach Moss is a workhorse running back for the Bengals. The Bengals are going to have to put together some more, less offensively challenged kind of games. They can score. They definitely can. Zach Moss is going to be involved. Tank Dell is one of those players, he's already dealing with an injury. Tank Dell could have a very valuable asset on this team. But right now, I don't think he's a start for me right now, even after a pretty good game last week. He's definitely depending on my lineup. That's depending on my lineup. I think Zach Moss is a start for me, especially considering all these running backs having running back woes. When I look at what Zach Moss has put together over the course of this season so far, he's sitting here at 136 yards, which let me see here for a moment. Sitting at 136 yards, which is, nothing too crazy, right? But, I look at it and say, okay, well, there's an upward swing in potential here. 136 yards, that's sitting him right around running back 29 on the season. Pacheco was a non-asset to you at that point. You flip Tank Dell and you flip Tank Dell to Moss. I think you'll be fine. I like that a lot. Jacob, start Dak or Jaden Daniels this week. So if you were with us at the top of the hour, we talked about Dak and we talked about the challenge that being a Thursday night game, Dak is probably going to do well. He's probably going to get 2 or 3 touchdowns, but he can easily just throw up a stinker. The line is weird. Dallas is a favorite by six. And they've not looked good in a lot of games that they've played. So I like rolling Dak, but the fact that you have Jane Daniels and the over and under in that game is 50. So I'm on Jane Daniels over Dak. I think Dak is going to have a good enough game. So Jacob, take that with a grain of salt. I think that Dak's going to have a good enough game. Normally I don't start quarterbacks on Thursday unless I absolutely have to. I think Dak's going to have a good game. He could very easily have a game where he gets one touchdown to 2 interceptions, something like that. I don't think that's the likely case. I think it's more likely he goes off for 2 or 3 touchdowns. But with your 4 yards or 4 points, 4 passing touchdown, I think Jaden Daniels is a better bet because he offers you that rushing potential, and he's in one of the highest over and under games this week. So I'm putting Jaden Daniels there. Should I drop Demarcus Robinson and add Aaron Rodgers to the bench or possibly start? I have Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's a start. I'm not picking up Aaron Rodgers. I'm holding Demarcus Robinson, seeing what happens this week. Again, Tutu Atwell got a lot of targets. I'm holding Demarcus Robinson. Definitely holding Demarcus Robinson. Adrian, who would I rather have, Pacheco, Chubb, or Brooks? I would rather have Brooks. Brooks coming off the IR with an Andy Dalton-led Carolina team. Chubb, we don't know what that injury is how that's gonna affect him at all. And Pacheco, I don't think is gonna play a game this season. So another game this season, because I think the Chiefs will be firmly in the playoffs by the time he's able to come back, and I don't think they're going to risk it for the long term. So I'd go Brooks out of that. I think that they're going to have to play Brooks. Chuba has looked good, but again, Brooks, they drafted him high. He coming back from the injury as well. I take Brooks over Pacheco and Chubb because I think this year at least he's going to at least play a bunch. Would you rather have a Dunze or Keenan Allen? Should I pick up Geno Smith or Purdy? So Sean, Would I rather have a Dunze or Sutton? I'd rather have a Dunze over Sutton. Would I rather have a Dunze over Allen? I'd rather have a Dunze over Allen. We don't know what Allen is going to really look like with this team. Caleb Williams had those 2 bad games. He had a great game. We don't know what Caleb Williams is going to do for this future. If he can end up having 250 yards, 280 yards a game, Odunze will be fine. So out of those 3 guys, I think I'd rather have Odunze over those 2 other guys. Should I pick up Geno Smith or Purdy? If Purdy is available, I would pick up Purdy against New England. I think New England, you saw what Aaron Rodgers did against New England last week. I think it's very possible that that Purdy puts up a really, really good game this week with that injury designation off. Marlon, great to have you back as always. I got a juicy trade. Should I trade Bowers, have Kincaid, T. Higgins for Jordan Mason, and Jordan Mason for Josh Jacobs? That's too much, Marlon. That is way too much. I know you really need a third running back due to injuries like what happened to Mixon, which is scary. So I need to prepare for the future. You absolutely do need to prepare for the future. I think that Jerome Ford is a piece that I would trade. I would trade. I would keep Shakir. I would definitely trade Ford and try to pick up Allen Lazard. Like I said, I think Allen Lazard has a chance to throw up past 20 points this week. I could be definitely wrong on that. But again, they're going to be moving the ball downfield. He's a red zone target. I think that it's easy that he has 2 touchdowns this week. Very easy. But again, Marlon, to your question here, I don't do that trade. I think it's too much to give up for Josh Jacobs. I think it's too much to give in order to move into Josh Jacobs. I think more likely what would be a trade that could move you there would be a Bowers and T. Higgins into Josh Jacobs. And if the guy wants a running back in return, you can talk to him about that. But I don't move Jordan Mason, T. Higgins, and Bowers for Josh Jacobs. That's way too much. Jordan Mason has a lot of value right now, and I'm not really worried about Jordan Mason moving forward. So I don't do that trade, Marlon. I try to, Mr. Wumbo, we see you. You're welcome, Mike. Flash, we see you. Rumple. Definitely we'll get to that question in a moment. So let me scroll back up here for a second. So where that leaves me then is, I wouldn't do that trade. I try to find something else happening. And if I wanted Josh Jacobs, I would trade T. Higgins and Bowers and start with that and not add in Jordan Mason. 9-3, would you even consider starting Terry over Tyreek this week? ESPN projects him more. That's the stuff that, we said about benching Evans for Juwan Jennings. That's the stuff that legends are made of, right? Terry McLaurin definitely projects to have a really good week this week. And I think that if you're looking at this realistically, Tyreek has the potential to have a really good game against Tennessee. Tennessee's not very, very good. Do I start Terry over him? I don't think I would. I don't think I would start Terry over him. But I think I'd need to revisit that on Saturday. I need to put together a couple of things. Right now, as I sit on Wednesday, I wouldn't start Terry over Tyreek. But I think by Friday or Saturday, once I looked at a couple more things, that maybe the picture would become clear. I want to caution you, though. The prior week, he had 6 receptions for 22 yards. So that's kind of what we're talking about here is Terry McLaurin's floor is much lower than Tyreek's floor, even with a bad quarterback situation. So that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Tyreek can definitely take you to a boom, and Tyler Huntley knows that he has to get the ball to Tyreek and to Jalen Waddle. So I'm starting Tyreek this week right now as we sit on Wednesday. Top 5. I have Gibbs, Najee, Zach Moss, and Charbonnet. Which one should I sit? Well, if Najee's hurt this week, you sit Najee. I don't sit Gibbs, and I don't sit Charbonnet. I know that, the Lions just had some injury to their line. I don't sit Charbonnet. I don't sit Gibbs. If Najee doesn't go, I sit Najee. And if Najee is healthy, I start Najee and bench Zach Moss. That's a hard decision for me because I do rank Zach Moss very highly, but I do want to give Gibbs, Najee, and Charbonnet a chance in my lineup this week. I think Kelsey for Kincaid and Diggs is a steal for the team getting Kincaid. What do you think? Yeah, Kincaid and Diggs are electric. If Kelsey's not good right now, okay, everybody, Kelsey's not good right now. So if I am moving on from Kelsey and I can get Kincaid and Diggs, that's an electric type of deal. Aiden, I made a massive mistake or win yesterday with my trade. I traded Mason, Gibbs, and Ayuk for Jay Jettis, Najee, and Singletary. So now my core is Barkley, Jefferson, Kyron, Devonta Smith. I only have Pickens, Ramondre in my flex spots. Hey, guys, I will be right back. I have to take care of something really quickly. Stay with us. I will be right back. Stay with us. I will answer that question in a moment. All right, we're back. So, Aiden, I traded Mason, Gibbs, Ayuk for Jettis, Najee, and Singletary. I think that you gave up a lot. Of pieces. However, getting back Justin Jefferson is always a valuable piece to get back on that backside. Singletary has been putting together a really good season. We'll see how long that lasts. He's definitely a piece that I'm playing on a week-to-week basis, I think, right now. Having Pickens and Ramondre in your flex spots is definitely something that I'd be concerned about. But having Barkley, Kyron, and Singletary moves Pickens out of that flex spot. So now you got a really nice, beefy running back core there. Gibbs is great. Mason's great. I would have kept Gibbs, Mason, and Ayuk, but I think what you got back in Justin Jefferson is good. I think I would have tried to get a little bit more than Najee there, but I think what you did is good enough. Your team is still very, very solid. I just would have rather have had Mason and Gibbs. And that's kind of when you look at the stats, Jefferson, blows it out of the water. So you have Jefferson and Devonta Smith, and you upgraded majorly Ayuk to Justin Jefferson. And that was the goal of this trade. Hey, Philly, how's it going? No, it's not burning down, but I did have to go to the bathroom. I just drank this whole big water cup. Where I see it at here, Aiden, is that I'm good with this because Ayuk to Jay Jettis is such a big upgrade, and you gave up Gibbs and Mason to get that done. And that's the type of deal that you have to do in order to get a guy like Justin Jefferson. You got two really solid pieces on the back end. I'm very comfortable with this trade. Like I said, I'm not sure I would have done it myself, but I do think it's a very good trade, especially when we think of the long-term respects for the season. Scooby, who wins in a Dynasty Superflex? Amon-Ra, a 2025 mid to late second, or George Pickens in a 2025 early to mid first round. Okay. Pickens 2025 early to mid first and a 2025 mid to late first. I think that Pickens hasn't yet built himself into this right situation where I am comfortable starting Pickens as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on a week-to-week basis. I think that he definitely has the big play potential, but right now as it sits, Amon-Ra is the guy that I would rather have. Amon-Ra with a 2025 mid to late is what I would like. Those picks are super valuable, but Amon-Ra is so good, just as young as George Pickens too. I think in terms of the Dynasty Superflex, I think that I would rather have a side A in Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra right now puts up ridiculous numbers, looks great, does have injury concerns. Pickens could easily put up those big numbers, but he's got to have a quarterback that's willing to continue to keep throwing him the ball. Fields has put him on some deep bombs, which have looked really good, but they have not really materialize due to penalties or other instances in time. I am all for having Amon-Ra here. Thoughts on DJ Moore for Waddle? He isn't interested in Ridley or JMO. I think it's fair enough to put DJ Moore to Waddle. I do think that DJ Moore and what we saw, it's scary to own a piece of both of these offenses right now, because what we saw of Caleb Williams was he can be great, but he also has shown us that he can be bad. Waddle, for that respect, is on an offense that could be electric if the right quarterback gives them that kind of push. So I think where I'm at on this is kind of a push for me. If I wanted to get Waddle right now for the long-term value and I had to move DJ Moore, I would be comfortable moving DJ Moore, Revin. That's kind of where I feel about that trade. I think DJ Moore provides you more value right now, Revin. But I think in the long term, Waddle will give you a little bit more on that backside. So I would do something like that. That makes sense to me because those are two players that we value pretty much very, very similarly, with Waddle having a better outcome, long-term outcome this year if the right quarterback situation happens. I have Burrow, Elijah, welcome. I have Burrow, Aaron Jones, Eckler, CeeDee Lamb, Olave, Laporta, Mostert. Advice, who do I trade to get depth? The guy I would trade to get depth right now is Olave. Olave is a guy that, if you would have came in last week when we were talking about Olave, he needs the games to be close in order to be a valuable asset to a fantasy team. If the games are out of hand, he's not really involved in this game. So as I see it, Olave gives you the best chance to upgrade your second running back position, with Mostert potentially coming back very soon. So Elijah, where I fall on this, hey, Sebastian, where I fall on this, Elijah, is that if I want to move, I could probably move Olave and move myself into a James Cook. Again, I'm going to say David Montgomery. You could probably move them very laterally that way. I think you could get a little bit more back-end pieces for Olave. You could go something really crazy, and I know this is going to be something weird to hear, Elijah, but if you really, really want to upgrade your running back room and you are comfortable getting back some wide receiver depth as well, you could move CeeDee Lamb. Has the best potential for, in the long term of the whole season. But you could move CeeDee Lamb and probably go after a Bijan, maybe a Gibbs. You could probably also target Nico Collins if you were to move on from CD. You could probably turn CeeDee Lamb into Nico Collins and something else. And I think Nico has a lot of value in the long term as well. Don't think that any player is unavailable. You can always move something into something else. But again, a guy like Neighbors is going to be hard to buy because he's just so hot right now. Again, Godwin, hard to buy players that are so hot right now. CeeDee Lamb is kind of not hot right now, but he will pick up. You do need a running back too, because with Eckler and Mostert being hurt, I don't really want that right now. Those are two guys that I do like, but I don't want them right now. So I think you can move CeeDee Lamb and move into something really nice. You might, like I said, you might be able to move into a Bijan and another wide receiver. Not as good as CeeDee Lamb, of course, but you could do that. You could also move CeeDee Lamb into a Nico Collins and maybe a Devin Singletary as well. So that's something that I would think about. It doesn't make your team much worse, but it makes your team much better in terms of the wide receiver department there. So that's kind of where I fall on that. You're welcome, Rumple, for the breakdown. Marlon, I never suggest dropping Shakir. Shakir's a giant hold for me. Absolutely. Steve, need of a running back. Should I pick up Dameon Pierce? When it comes to Pierce, he hasn't showed us much at all in his history. So I'm not willing to pick up Pierce unless I absolutely need a running back. I really don't want any part of Pierce. However, if you do need a running back and having Dameon Pierce and you're going to start Dameon Pierce or something of that nature is going to happen, could be worth it. With the hamstring injury, with him just not being good in general, I really don't think he's worth considering picking up. So this week, Hunter, do I start Worthy or do I start Shakir? So Joe would tell you to start Worthy. He really, really thinks that Worthy in this divisional matchup will be used and will be used to a great degree. For me, Baltimore's defense isn't great. We suggested, not starting them for fantasy purposes. I think I start Shakir, man. I think that both of these players have good upside this week, but I do like the usage that Shakir is getting, and he has been getting touchdowns with that usage as well. So I start Shakir as we sit here today on Wednesday. I could flip a little bit later in the week, but I do think that Shakir is the start out of Shakir or Worthy. Bob B, welcome. Would I be giving up too much if I offered Calvin Ridley to get Mark Andrews? Don't go out and get Mark Andrews, Bob. I don't know how long you've been watching the show, but we did say in the offseason that Mark Andrews is not an asset that I want to target. I'm 1-2 in dead at tight end, had Juwan Johnson for the last 2 weeks. If I were you and I was looking for a tight end, Bob, I would go and I would try to come after and target. I'd probably try to target the Jake Ferguson owner. See if Tyler Conklin is on the waiver wire. Also look into seeing if you can look into picking up Eric All Jr., who's another one of the tight ends from the Bengals. Those are guys that I would think of picking up ahead of Mark Andrews. And I think that Ridley, you're buying the name with Mark Andrews. He hasn't turned into a good point in this season yet. The stats aren't looking good. The metrics and the optics are not looking good. 6 receptions, 65 yards. That's really nothing to get excited about. And when we look at the targets for Andrews, right, he's sitting there at 27th among all tight ends in terms of targets. Ahead of him, Austin Hooper, Johnny Mundt. I'm not really trading Calvin Ridley for a guy that's below Johnny Mundt in terms of targets. Sorry, right? That's not something I want to get into. I would rather get into a Jonnu Smith potentially. You won't have to give up a lot to get into Jonnu Smith. Moving into Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz might even be on the waiver wire. But yeah, my main goal, if I'm moving Ridley for Ferguson. That's what I would like to do, Bob. So hopefully that helps. Would you do Waddle and Javonte Williams? Yeah, I would definitely do that. When I said Allen in my other comment, I meant Keenan Allen. Yeah, Sean. So Keenan Allen for sure. I got you. I understood what you meant. Bam, Mr. Wumbo, I see you there. I like that people are responding back to everybody in the chat as well. I have Lunding, Jennings, JSN, Quentin Johnson, Bateman, and Dobbs. Yeah, Jennings might not have super long-term value for you, and Quentin Johnson probably needs some good quarterback play to keep going. Bateman I'm not very high on Bateman. He is what he is, and Dobbs will probably be better when Jordan Love comes back. I don't sell Ridley right now, but if I'm selling Ridley, I'm selling him. Actually, I would sell Ridley, but if I'm selling him, I'm selling for a better tight end than Mark Andrews right now at this point in the season. Don't buy names. Buy projectable stats moving forward. Buy what you're seeing on the field. There's no reason to say that he's going to get better. There's no reason to say that. That a car accident could have, lingering injuries, and maybe he's just getting old. I'm not buying in on that as well. Yeah, RGQ, if you can go out and get Worthy with Mahomes, that's what I try to do. Would you try Pittman and Ford for Rome? No, I don't think I would. But I do think that that's something that could probably get accepted. Would I rather have Jane Daniels or Caleb Williams at my QB position? Right now in fantasy, I'd rather have Jane Daniels at my QB position. Caleb Williams needs to string together a couple more 200-yard performances in order for me to feel like he's a starter in a 12-team league. Right now, he's a bench spot. Right now, Jane Daniels is a starter in a 12-team league. Caleb Williams is not a starter in a 12-team league. And you weren't even really thinking about starting him, I don't think, for most people. Just looking at it, Sam Darnold has been putting together a better season so far than Caleb Williams. I'm not saying anything about Caleb Williams' future. I'm just looking at the past. I would rather start Jane Daniels over Caleb Williams right now. Pittman for Ford for Terry was what I was thinking about. Yeah, I think something like that will get accepted. Just remember that Terry McLaurin's floor is also really, really low. You saw it, but his ceiling also can be really, really high. That's the Terry McLaurin way. Pittman and Ford right now are very similar. You got down 2 for 1. You go on the waiver wire. You pick up somebody who's definitely more valuable. I think I like that. Traded Brian Thomas Jr. for Jaden Daniels last week since I already had London, CD, and DK, and Addison. Thinking about doing Daniels for Brooks now since I got Love coming back. Dylan, where I fall on this, I got Jacob, Pollard, Dowdle, and Keaton Mitchell at running back. You do need a running back. I think you could get more than Jonathan Brooks for Jaden Daniels. I really think that you can get more out of Jaden Daniels than that. I would see if I can scoop, looking at your wide receivers here, seeing if I could pair up a Daniels and a London to see how much I can move up in my wide receiver and running back room. Right now, I think it's fair enough to target guys like Devin Singletary. I don't think you shoot low with Brooks. I think you could target Daniels for Singletary, or Daniels for Dobbins and a piece, or Daniels for Stevenson and maybe something else. Daniels and a piece maybe for Travis Etienne. Again, your composition of your team is good, and you just kind of want that third running back to kind of solidify yourself. I don't move Daniels for Brooks. I see the value there, but I think that you could probably move Addison for Brooks or something of that nature, or Addison and Dowdle for Brooks, something along those lines. If I'm trading Daniels, I'm trading him trying to get a Singletary out of him, or I'm trying to get a Najee out of him. I'm not moving into Jonathan Brooks right now. I think that Jonathan Brooks is still a buy lower than a Jaden Daniels. Maybe you could piece together Jaden Daniels and Dowdle for Brooks and somebody else. I think that's what I'd rather do more than that, Dylan. Jaden Daniels has put together some really good games, and you need to really get more out of him for that. If that's the most you can get, you can do it, but I'd try a couple things first before I do. What do you think about Gibbs and Pickens for Rice and Singletary? Rumble. I like the Rice and Singletary side. I think that Rice is a way more elite wide receiver right now than Pickens. So you giving up Gibbs, like you said, you already have Barkley and Josh Jacobs. You're moving into Rashee Rice with Gibbs and Singletary. Again, I'd like to try to get something more with Gibbs. I think that Gibbs plus Pickens can move you into something super awesome, but Rice is super great this year. I say that and it sounds really strange, but he's doing really, really well. It's what we wanted him to do. And if he didn't have what happened to him in the offseason, he would have been a second round wide receiver, probably back end first round wide receiver heading into this draft that we just had. I would do that because Gibbs is putting up good stats. Rice is putting up good stats. Singletary's look good. Pickens is probably going to look good in the long term. And looking at your team, you have the ability to move on from Gibbs. You need to move on from Pickens, and getting Rice is solid. I would do that trade. I think you could get a little bit more, but I think I would definitely do that trade 100%. So coming back down here, Bob, I chose Andrews because I'm playing against Lamar this week. I have Mahomes and also pitched Quentin Johnson for Kelsey for a stack upside. Yeah, I don't think you need Mark Andrews, even with him playing Lamar. That is a non-issue for me. I know you're trying to protect yourself in terms of your assets. I'm pretty sure the injury most tight ends have is the tag next to the name that says tight end. Yeah, Mr. Wumbo. When I see tight end, it's just that everybody's injured, and it's just a weird year. I saw a couple content creators that were like, "Hey, I want to move out. I want to get rid of tight ends off of rosters." That what it is. I definitely still try to target Jake Ferguson. That's who I would definitely try to target, Bob. I just go after Jake Ferguson, regardless of the matchup. I know you're trying to protect yourself, but again, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill are kind of the guys, and with Lamar and Bateman, those are kind of the guys right now, and likely as well. Thoughts on JMO? Should I trade for him? Dude has 3 Lions players starting. I think if you're trading for JMO, you just have to understand what we saw this week. JMO definitely has the big play potential. He's definitely an option that is on a very high-powered offense, 209 yards on the year, 11 receptions. This is a floor game, in a game that he should have done really well in. When he doesn't get a lot of targets, again, he had 11 in week 2, 9 in week 1, 3 last week. Didn't do anything with them. We have to be cautiously optimistic of that. Do I think he's worth trading for? Yeah. And I think, especially with the Lions going into the bye, I think it's really worth talking to the owner of JMO if you're willing to eat that bye. I'd play around with it. He's not a player that's going to cost you a lot, especially after that dummy stupid weep there with a -7 in rushing yards and then just 9 yards. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. Mike, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm also considering dropping Cooks for Wan'Dale Robinson. I would do that. It's not crazy at all. Cooks's floor is really low. His ceiling is a touchdown and 70, 80 yards, I feel. This offseason, Joe was buying a lot into Cooks. And I think it's fair to say right now, Jalen Tolbert is taking a lot of targets away from Cooks. Wan'Dale, there's no threat that's taking targets away from Wan'Dale other than Malik Neighbors. And Malik Neighbors isn't really taking targets away from Wan'Dale. He's making Wan'Dale's situation better. I'm in on Wan'Dale. I think dropping Cooks for Wan'Dale Robinson even in a shallow league is a good decision. I'm actually, with all the injuries in my home league that I'm having, I am starting Wan'Dale Robinson as my flex. And he's been satisfactory enough. I didn't win this past week because I got the top scoring team this week, but I would move into Wan'Dale Robinson. I do like that. Flash, my lineup is Purdy, Harrison, Rice, Brees, Achane, Andrews, Ayuk. Tell me why I keep feeling like I should trade Achane away. Flash, here's the reason why you hey Jesse, how's it going? Hey Joe, how's it going? Dylan, I see you. We'll get back to that. Cash, we'll get back to that. So Flash, where I fall on this, right, is Achane. There's a lot of players in the league right now that are either side of the fence. Last week it was Jamar. Last week it was Terry McLaurin. There's at multiple different levels. But Achane's one of those guys right now that still has value, even with a team that might have problem. It might be problematic at quarterback. We saw this week with Devin Achane. Let's just pull up his stats so that we can be very clear with this. Is that Achane is sitting here with 150 yards on the season. He had 14 overall touches in week 3. Didn't really do much with those touches. As long as the quarterbacks are not going to keep teams honest down the field, Achane will get gobbled up, right? Week 1, he pretty much got gobbled up in the rushing attack, but got the targets. He's still getting a lot of targets, 5 in that game. There's going to be a game against Indy in week 7. Indy sucks, okay, in terms of their ability to stop the rush with DeForest Buckner out. So if I were you, what I would think about doing, if I wanted to trade Achane, I would move out of Achane, upgrade your Mark Andrews experience, maybe try to go out there and see if Trey McBride is healthy, see if Sam Laporta is healthy, try to move into a Sam Laporta and maybe take a little bit of a downgrade at running back. Maybe you can even move Achane into a James Cook. James Cook's usage looks really good. The thing about Achane is that, we saw what he could do with a great quarterback. 22 attempts, 96 yards. 7 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. That was with Tua. When Tua went down, there was more attempts rushing, right? But Mostert will be back. Who knows what Jalen Wright looks like right now? It doesn't look like a starter right now. I think it's fair to move out of Achane, Flash. And if I were moving out of Achane, I'd still want compensation in the vein of a James Cook, maybe even something a little bit better, maybe a Jacobs and something else. But I also want to move out of Andrews. Andrews is really hurting your team right now. He's a have to start, but he's not I want to start. He's a have to start because of his name. He's a have to start because of his history, but he's not a have to start because of what he's been doing this year. How big of a jump is Marvin Harrison to Jefferson in PPR? Worth trying Harrison and Richards for Jefferson, where Jefferson team has a poor quarterback situation and Marvin team has Jaden Daniels. So Mr. Wumbo, let's talk about this. You also suggested, hey, Bam, how's it going? Cash, I see you. Dylan Santiago, I see you. We'll definitely get down there for some of those questions. What about Jamar McBride? I have Bowers for Jane Reed, Odunze, and Barkley in PPR. Team is 1-2 to duds and injuries. So if I trade Chase, my wide receivers would be Cooper, Pittman, Reed, and Odunze. I really don't like the fact that Pittman is on that list, and Cooper, is hit or miss depending on what Deshaun Watson floats at you. I do think it's smart to go after a guy like Jayden Reed because he's going to get better. He has the potential to finish as a top 15, top 12 wide receiver in the league with Jordan Love. Barkley, I mean, if I can go out and get Barkley, knowing what you said about your team, hey, Gusto, how's it going? Knowing what we said about your team here, I think it's worth thinking about. But I wouldn't try to trade Marvin Harrison for Justin Jefferson, Mr. Wumbo. The pedigree on Jefferson is great. Sam Darnold looks great, and Jefferson is doing what Jefferson should do. Marvin Harrison looks great. He's on a team with Kyler Murray who's getting the ball to him really well. I don't think I would move Harrison and Richardson for Jefferson. I think the Jefferson team has a poor quarterback situation, and the Marvin team has Jaden Daniels. It's fair enough to do that trade. Is it a fair trade? I think it's a fair enough trade in terms of what Richardson has been giving us this year. Would I want to trade Marvin Harrison? I wouldn't. If I was the owner of Richardson, I wouldn't be giving up Harrison. I'd be looking at the quarterbacks that are on the waiver wire right now, maybe trying to drop something or getting a back end Aaron Rodgers for this week or something along those lines. I would not be giving up Marvin Harrison Jr. And Richardson for Jefferson. It's worth it, but I personally don't like giving up Marvin Harrison right now. Philly, what's up? What do you think of this? Is a fair trade? I'm getting Gibbs and Devonta Smith and giving him Nico, Aaron Jones, and Ladd. Ladd's kind of that juice on the back end. Joe and I really like Ladd McConkey in the long term of the season. But it's problematic right now for the Chargers. Quentin Johnson looks like a guy that's going to continue to be more involved. And Ladd is going to be involved, but it's going to look a little bit different. I like getting Gibbs. I would check into that injury situation before I made this trade because if Devonta Smith had a concussion, he's probably going to miss this week. We'll see. He has that floor of, in a season of 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's kind of gotten that his whole career. Nico Collins is one of my favorite wide receivers right now. The stats back it up as well. So you're upgrading at running back for the long term in Gibbs because, again, Aaron Jones has looked really, really good. And for some people, that wouldn't be so much of an upgrade because Jones has been performing really, really well. But what we'd like to see, again, he has 12 receptions, Aaron Jones. He's the 9th best running back in terms of yardage. Gibbs is landing there at 12. I think that Gibbs is a better piece there than Aaron Jones. So you're downgrading a little bit on Devonta Smith, putting Ladd in on the back end. I'd do something like this. This is enough. This would be enough for me. Maybe I'd try to keep McConkey and just float Gibbs and Devonta Smith for Nico and Aaron Jones, see what they say. But I do think it's a fair trade because McConkey's the juice to kind of get Gibbs and Devonta Smith's. But I don't think you should have to give that because I think it's enough the way it sits right now. What if he adds Braylon Allen to the trade? Would it still not be worth it? So coming back up here, Marlon, to what you were talking about, I don't know. I trade Bowers and T. Higgins and Mason for Josh Jacobs. No, I really don't think that's worth it. You're giving up I think what I'd still do is try to float Bowers and Higgins first before I added in Jordan Mason. Maybe I'm not floating it for Josh Jacobs. Maybe I'm throwing Higgins and Bowers out there for David Montgomery and a piece. I like the idea of you going out there and getting Josh Jacobs, but I don't think that I would do that trade right now as it sits here on Wednesday. Aiden, when we were talking about the trade, that's where it's at, right? That's the kind of the process that we have to make. Do I trade David Montgomery and Marvin Harrison for London, Jonathan Brooks, Tank Dell, full PPR team? No. Sebastian, no. Marvin Harrison is such a valuable asset. David Montgomery is such a valuable asset. Jonathan Brooks could eventually be an elite player. We'll see what happens after he comes off the IR. Tank Dell already hurt, definitely has that elite upside. We saw that last year. London could go either way. I'm not giving up Montgomery and Harrison, two elite options on their teams for this mixture, because then I'd have to also drop somebody. No, do not do this trade, Sebastian. Do not do this trade. And Sebastian, would you answer to Jesse? Would y'all trade Achane for Reed? No. I think that Achane would be a piece. If I want to get Reed, I'd ask for Reed and some other pieces to get Achane, but I would not trade them straight up. Achane still has a lot of value right now. Reed is going to have a lot of value coming out, but that has to come with Jordan Love's return. We're not settled yet on when Jordan Love is coming back. So Sebastian, yeah, I wouldn't do that trade. If I wanted to do that, if I wanted to do something, I'd be okay giving up David Montgomery, but I don't want to give up Marvin Harrison. So try to see if you can work something to do a London, Jonathan Brooks, maybe Tank Dell, to get something of that ilk. My running backs are Hall, Kamara, ETN, Ford. My wide receivers are London, Rice, Neighbors, Godwin, and my tight end Bowers and Goddard. Would you recommend me to trade Godwin for Lamb? Augusto, if you can make that happen, do it. I doubt that happens. I don't think anybody's selling CD just for Chris Godwin. But if you can start the conversation, maybe float Godwin and Bowers for Lamb and see what the discussion looks like. But more than likely, if I'm going to go out and get Lamb, you're going to probably have to offer London and Godwin, and I don't think you want to do that. So you can try, but I think that will not get accepted right away. You might be able to float Kamara and Godwin, use their hot starts and buy into Lamb if that's something that you want to do. I think you're settled on Rice and Neighbors right now look really good. And right now, I think Godwin starts over London. So, and Hall and Kamara, with Kamara's injury, we'll see what happens there. Are your starting two running backs right now? That's kind of how I view that. We see everybody in the chat. We'll get to your questions, Cash. Rumpel will follow up. Philly will follow up. Elijah will follow up. James will get to you. Yeah, Mr. Rumbo. So Santiago, should I trade Tyreek and Jacobs for Gibbs? My running backs are Henry and Pollard. My wide receivers are Evans, DK, and Zay Flowers. No, I don't trade Tyreek and Jacobs for Gibbs. Something that I would think about doing. Now, I love Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is a really good asset to have. I think maybe something like Jacobs and Evans for Gibbs. But I would also try to just do Jacobs. And if you don't like Flowers, you could probably try Jacobs and Flowers for Gibbs. I think over the course of the season, we'll realize that Gibbs is going to do great and Jacobs is going to kind of normalize a little bit more. I think I wouldn't do that. I could see the reasons why you would do that. Maybe I'd try to float Evans and Pollard for Gibbs if you like Gibbs' schedule coming up. Again, Pollard has some great games coming up down the pipeline, so we'll see. That's kind of my viewpoint on that, Santiago. Yeah, so we followed up on this this trade right here. So two different leagues, Mr. Wumbo, you said, following along here. In this league right here, this trade right here, I think that you're getting back good enough value with Barkley and Odunze and Reed, but I really don't want to start Pittman. So while I think this is a fair trade, especially because you're going out there and getting Barkley and you're getting two pieces, Jaden Reed and Odunze, I'd maybe try to talk to the guy and be like, okay, I'm giving up Jamar, you're giving up Barkley. I like Jaden Reed a lot. So I think I would do that trade, but I'm a little hesitant on trading Jamar, but I think that Barkley's enough in return. So I would do that trade. I just would try to also want to sell Pittman, and I really don't want to trust Amari Cooper in the long term. So you're really setting yourself up there if Jordan Love doesn't come back very, very soon to have a very weak kind of wide receiver situation. Not a weak wide receiver situation, but an uncertain wide receiver situation on a week-to-week basis because Pittman's not startable right now. He's really not. Bam. Garrett Wilson or Chris Godwin rest of the season. Dalton Kincaid or Jake Ferguson rest of the season. I think I'm on Dalton Kincaid rest of the season. Again, these players are gonna normalize out, I think, over the long term. Right now, Jake Ferguson looks really good. Dalton Kincaid looks really, average. Hasn't been getting a lot of work. I think that work will come when we look at just the receptions. 9 receptions on 16 targets, and Dalton Kincaid has 8 receptions on 11 targets. Just hasn't done as much as Jake Ferguson. I think Dalton Kincaid will be fine. I also think that both of these players will probably end up in top 6 in terms of tight ends by year's end. So that's kind of the viewpoint that I have on that. Garrett Wilson, Chris Godwin. Right now, Chris Godwin, I think, projects to have a better end of season ranking than Garrett Wilson because of what we've seen so far. But I think when we look at the schedule, when we head to the Jets, right, is that they're playing in a division where they're going to have to keep pace with certain teams. So again, you got the Broncos, the Vikings, the Bills. The Steelers is going to be a tough matchup for Garrett Wilson with Joey Porter Jr. The Colts is going to be nice. Seahawks should be nice. Jaguars will be a nice matchup late. Again, Dolphins, Bills will probably be okay matchups late, and the Rams as well. I think Garrett Wilson projects fine over the course of the next couple of games, right? Especially towards the middle half of that season. Chris Godwin's on a hot streak. And like we said, you can trade out of Chris Godwin or into Chris Godwin, depending upon how you feel where that hot streak is coming from. But when we look at this schedule coming out, again, you have Eagles, Falcons, Saints, Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, Niners. You got the Giants late in the season, the Panthers late in the season, the Raiders late in the season, Chargers late in the season, Cowboys late in the season, Panthers again. I think I'd rather have Chris Godwin rest of the season than Garrett Wilson. But again, both are capable of putting up some dud games. Chris Godwin more likely to put up that big dud like a but I think I'd rather have Chris Godwin. I don't like the backfield situation in the Texans, but who are we getting off waivers? Akers or Pierce? Akers. Again, Pierce is coming off an injury. Didn't look good. Akers just looked average in the game that he played. I'm taking Akers over Pierce this week if I'm picking up either of those two players off the waiver wire. That's kind of my opinion. And I think the stats do back that up as well, because again, the last time we saw Pierce on this team, he was absolutely dreadful. That's why they went out to get Joe Mixon. He's not going to all of a sudden look better, especially after an injury. Should I accept Tyreek and Connor for Garrett Wilson, Swift, and either Kincaid or Ferguson? I have those 2 trade offers right now. Yeah, I like Connor better than Swift, and I value Kincaid right now a little bit over Ferguson, but it's tight. I do like Tyreek Hill and Connor over Garrett Wilson and Swift, and then kind of the tight end is dealer's choice. They're very close, and I think, like I said, I think they're both going to end up top 6 at the end of the season, but we'll definitely see how that goes. Dylan, the guy with Brooks fell victim to Tua, so he's desperate at quarterback. I tried moving Jane Daniels and Addison into Brooks and Devontae, and even tried my luck with Daniels and London into Marv. No luck. His bench doesn't have much to offer. Maybe Daniels and McPherson for Brooks and Aubrey into Marv and Brooks. He offered Brooks for Daniels straight up, so I have the benefit of countering. So, as we see it here, Dylan, I'd kind of just choke him out right now at this point in time. He wants Jaden Daniels. He's going to have to give up more than Brooks for Jaden Daniels. So I understand that he's tight right now. But if he wants to get a caliber quarterback of Jaden Daniels, and just to say, be comfortable sitting on it, because again, with Jonathan Brooks, we haven't seen Jonathan Brooks play yet. And, you have the luxury of sitting on Daniels right now at this point in the season. He's nearing a return to play, but he's not playing yet. So it's going to be at least a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks until Brooks plays. That's 3 more weeks of Jane Daniels that you can go up and down. If he wants Daniels, he's going to have to pay for it. And I'm not suggesting that it's a great idea to hold him hostage like that, but I think you deserve more than Brooks, because again, Brooks isn't even going to be playing for the next couple of weeks. That's how I feel about that. And I think that it's something to really think about. Since his running back 2 is DeAndre Swift, and if I land Brooks, I can move him or Pollard to get that deal done. I'm also trying to move London into Garrett since my league is 2-man keepers, so CD and Garrett as keepers would be insane. That would be really good and much better than London. Since his running back 2 is DeAndre Swift, and if I could land Brooks, I can move him or Pollard to get that deal done. If trading Daniels into Brooks, Dylan, if trading Daniels into Brooks allows you to make another trade that gets you into Garrett Wilson and something else, then I would do it. But if I'm just trading Jane Daniels into Brooks and then not moving Brooks on the back end, I wouldn't do it. So if you're doing it to make a trade for some other aspect to upgrade your team even further, like you just said, I would do something like that. Okay, that's kind of like the deal right there. So getting to the next question here, I need a wide receiver. I have Collins and Shakir. I have Collins and Shakir. The running backs are Gibbs, Mason, and Kyron. Have CMC and Puka stashed. Okay, that's good. That's a great start. Was offered Amon-Ra for Gibbs straight up. Would you take the full PPR? Yeah. Yes, I would. I would definitely 100% cash money. Dylan is absolutely right on this one. You have Collins and Shakir. You're going to play Shakir as a back end, as your flex now. Going out there and getting, you have Kyron and Mason. Kyron and Mason are going to be fine right now. And you have CMC on the backside. You are fine. Whether CMC comes back or not, Mason is going to be fine. Trading Gibbs away right now. You're not buying into that. You're getting 2 weeks now of a player ahead of Gibbs. And if for some reason you want to flip someone later, I'm okay with that. But yeah, dude, getting Collins and Amon-Ra on your team. Collins is elite. He's a top 5 wide receiver, top 6 wide receiver. Amon-Ra, similarly, top 5 wide receiver when fully healthy, right? Gibbs is a top 10 running back. You're getting back a top 5 wide receiver to pair with a top 5 wide receiver, top 6, if you want to include Jamar and Jefferson and CD Lamb and all those guys as well. I think I'd do that trade 1,000%. Dylan is right. I would do that trade. Do I trade Tyreek for Ayuk? No. I like the idea of buying Ayuk, Santiago, but I don't like the idea of giving up Tyreek for Ayuk. It's something that I would consider. And going back to your original question here, Santiago, Reek and Jacobs for Gibbs. We don't want to give too much. Don't sell Tyreek just because we're nervous on Tyreek right now. Tyreek's ceiling is still pretty high when given the right situation at quarterback. And like Joe said, the Miami's going to realize if these 2 quarterbacks don't rule out, that's going to be 2 games. They're going to go out and get somebody that can get the ball to Tyreek. Okay, just to understand that. Mike McDaniel's not stupid. He might be stupid about letting Tua play with a concussion and all that. But if Tua can't play, he's going to go out and get a guy that will be able to make these guys shine and get them to the playoffs. If Skylar Thompson can't do that, if Tyler Huntley can't do that, then they'll go out there and get that. I don't trade Tyreek for Ayuk. You're welcome, Bob. You're welcome, Mr. Wumbo as well. So Eagles, you have Chase and Nakua as wide receiver. Right now, Nakua's not playing. So going up here, I'm getting Gibbs and Devonta Smith and giving him Nico Collins, Aaron Jones, and Ladd McConkey. Yeah, knowing what you have right there and knowing Philly that you have Chase, I'm more comfortable doing that trade. So that looks like your team looks like Chase. If you give up Nico, Chase, Devonta Smith, and then you pick up Gibbs, yeah, I think something like that is fair. So you just heard me talk about trading away Gibbs and getting into Gibbs. Both are okay to do right now because even with Frank Ragnell's injury, there should be a lot of good work for Gibbs. So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Rumpel. So last trade question. We love trade questions. Would be Gibbs and Kirk to Drake London and Jonathan Brooks be interesting? We do have an IR spot. No, I don't trade Gibbs into Drake London. That's downgrading in value to me. Gibbs is still hot. Gibbs, like I said, is top 10 running back. Drake London is not a top 10 wide receiver. So if I wanted to go after Brooks, why don't you just trade Kirk for Brooks straight up? Especially considering the IR spot. If you want Brooks, trade an asset that you're not starting, but could start on another team, like Christian Kirk could start in a back-end flex spot and go out and get Jonathan Brooks. Take a chance on him like that. Shakir or Cooper this week? I have Shakir. James, I think that Cooper could have another good enough game, but all of this really depends on Deshaun Watson, his development, and just considering this year. I'm still on team Shakir this week. And I don't think that would change over the course of this week. As you heard me talk to Steve, I think that Amari Cooper could put up a good game, but I think that Shakir is even more likely to do that this week. Would you trade Dell for Ayuk? Yes, Elijah, I would trade Dell for Ayuk. I don't know if that gets accepted, but I would trade Dell for Ayuk. Absolutely 1,000%. Ayuk is once all these components come back, Ayuk is a valuable piece to this offense. He will throw up scrubs of a game just like Dell. Dell is an elite option, whether he's going to continue to be used as an elite option. He had a good game week 3, not a great game week 2. I would do that trade. I'm not sure it gets accepted, but I would do that. Elijah, I'm 1-2. My team dropped 55 points this week. That is rough in a PPR 12-man. I have Kyler and Carr, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Mason, Eckler, Tyreek, Mike Evans, JSN, Wandale, and Shaheed McBride. What should I do? So if I were you, I would definitely talk about moving Mike Evans. Mike Evans, I think, is a good piece to trade for, but I also think he could be worth moving right now with this in mind. If I can move Mike Evans and Shaheed right now and upgrade into a better third running back position than Eckler, maybe you can move Mike Evans and Shaheed into a David Montgomery. Maybe you can move Mike Evans and Shaheed into a Cooks, knowing that Shaheed had a bad game, but Mike Evans is equally likely to have a good game, just facing off against some bad competition or some good competition. And Shaheed has always that big play potential. I think that I would talk about moving Evans and Shaheed and try to get into a James Cook. Try to get as high as you can, right? Try to start pairing some positions up. Maybe also, if you wanted to and change up that wide receiver room, you might be able to move Josh Jacobs and Mike Evans and move into a Marvin Harrison Jr. and a David Montgomery situation, or a Marvin Harrison Jr. and a Najee Harris type of situation. Those are the trades that I'd be willing to think about, Elijah, if I were you. You had a bad string of luck with the quarterback situation with Miami. Again, you're also, I wouldn't trade Tyreek, but you're also one of those teams that has the ability to trade Tyreek because you are 1-2, and he could significantly upgrade you at some other positions. You need to move out of Eckler at that back end. Wandale and JSN are going to have their weeks, but it hurts having Mike Evans right now not performing in the way that we know Mike Evans could perform. He always has a chance to come back, but I would definitely see if I can move Mike Evans and Josh Jacob into something better, or Mike Evans and Shaheed into something like a James Cook, who is very good, that will upgrade you, and then try to get an Allen Lazard on the waiver wire. You poked around and you're thinking about Gibbs for A.J. Brown and Allen Lazard. They have plenty of wide receiver depth, but are hurting at running back. I don't think that's a reach. I think that trade is fair enough because we're drafting them at the same position. Gibbs is going to be great. A.J. Brown dealing with the hamstring. If you're willing to take A.J. Brown on, I think getting Allen Lazard back, I love that trade. I absolutely love that trade. You poked around your league more. Gibbs and Jerry Jeudy for A.J. Brown and Allen Lazard. They're hurting at running back. Yeah, I'd rather just do Gibbs and for A.J. Brown and Lazard, but I think that Gibbs and Jerry Jeudy for A.J. Brown and Lazard is fair enough value. I would do that trade. You're welcome. Absolutely. You're very welcome, Rumpel. We appreciate it. So yeah, that's kind of my viewpoint on that. You have the right thinking. This is the right kind of trade to think about right here. Moving into Allen Lazard. He is a favorite target for Aaron Rodgers. Jerry Jeudy is getting targeted, but who knows where those touchdowns are going to go. Edwin, what can I get for CMC right now? If Joe was here, he'd say, hold CMC, put him in your IR spot, but he's not here. So if I'm going out and moving CMC right now, CMC is probably going to return an Ayuk level wide receiver and a Brian Robinson level running back right now, because people are scared of him going to Germany. But what people aren't understanding really is that he's going there because he's trying to get something done that can't be done in the United States. But again, there's a risk that will come back. There's a risk that when he does come back, that Jordan Mason will still have a majority of those carries. So I'm only selling CMC if I need to, and I'd probably be looking for like a Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, plus an Ayuk level wide receiver. James, Ferguson or Bowers this week. Bowers had a stinker of a game, that's for sure. We weren't liking that very much. This week, I think I'd go Ferguson on Thursday. I don't really like starting Thursday players, but with the Raiders against the Browns are a very beatable defense. I think I'd start Ferguson, and I think I'd start him with confidence. Thoughts on Pittman and Ford for Terry and Khalil? Yes, I would do that. I don't want Keenan Allen. Terry and Khalil for Pittman and Ford. I'm moving myself into Khalil Shakir right now. If that's still Khalil Shakir, I'm moving on with that right now. Could you do CMC for George Pickens and Jameson Williams? Yeah, that's the type of deal that you could absolutely do. That's absolutely something that you can do. You can totally move into Jameson Williams and George Pickens. But do you want to, right? How does your roster look in terms of that wide receiver market? Jameson Williams is going to have a deep threat, but if he's not getting the targets, he's not going to get a lot of points. Same with George Pickens. CMC is definitely worth a keep. If you can move him into George Pickens and Jameson Williams, I'd like a running back. But yeah, that's something worth considering. And last question of the day. We thank you so much, Rumpel, for being with us. We appreciate every sub that we have, and we appreciate all the questions and comments. This will be the last question of the night. I have Kyron Dobbins, and I also have Jonathan Brooks in IR. Do I trade Brian Robinson for Ayuk? Yes. I think that it's very worth considering trading. Dobbins is going to have a little bit of trouble in the weeks ahead with some of those injuries to the offensive line and to Herbert. So while I do think Dobbins does still have the potential to finish top 8 in yards on the season and top 12 in terms of touchdowns, that's I'm kind of muting those expectations right now with these offensive line injuries. Do I think trading Brian Robinson for Ayuk is good? Yes. Brian Robinson is the type of player that is going to get carries. He's not very efficient, so he's going to need the game to be going in his favor, and Jaden Daniels does run the ball a lot. So would I do that? Absolutely, 1,000% yes. Ayuk using this as kind of an off season. If Ayuk doesn't do well after 2 or 3 more weeks, then I'm ready to hit the panic button. But if I can buy him for Brian Robinson, I will do that right now. So team players, thank you so much for joining us today. I don't know if we'll be on tomorrow, but we will be usually on every week, usually 3 or 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm not sure what our commitments are like tomorrow. I'm definitely not going to be here tomorrow, but we appreciate everybody for joining in, and we appreciate everybody for helping out. And we definitely want you to hit that like button, hit that like and subscribe button. We're all here for you. We're here as a community. We're here to help each other. So everybody in the chat, we can also you can also help everybody else. So we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Local Football Flavor signing out.